Thank you. We had a closed session, and we have a report from our city attorney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council was in closed session on the two items listed on the agenda. First was a public employee evaluation. In that matter, the council met and conferred to conduct that evaluation. There's no action taken or to report at this time. The second item was a conference with labor negotiators, as indicated. And again, that process is just beginning. Council was given, and there's no action to report at this time.
Thank you. Next is our invocation and pledge of allegiance, led by Mayor Pro Tempore Duper, and please stand. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Okay, now's the time for our public to make any comments that are not about subjects that are not agendized. I have two requests, and if anyone else would like to speak, you can either come up afterwards or submit a request to address the City Council. The first speaker is Ella Haddad.
I'm very happy to be able to address the council this afternoon. My name is Ella Haddad, and I've been a dietitian nutritionist for many, many years. And with me, I've got Josie Perez, who's one of my students. I also teach nutrition at Loma Linda University. And we're here today to encourage the council, the City Council of Loma Linda, to adopt an ordinance which has to do with healthy by default. This ordinance is also connected with the Senate bill, California Senate Bill 1192. What this has to do with is the kids' meal. Kids' meals that are sold at restaurants that are bundled, the food items are bundled as a meal. We're proposing that the default drink will be either milk or water without any added sugar. The waters can be varieties of water, but it shouldn't have an added sugar. Now, customers can ask for soda, but that has to be a request. The default option with the kids meal would be either milk or a non-sugary drink. As you know, sugar is just empty calories, and kids get too many of their calories from their sugar already. One soda can be between 120 and 200 calories, and that's quite a high proportion of the calories they get throughout the day. Also, with the problem of obesity, this will help encourage healthier drink options. There are a number of cities in Northern California that have adopted it. Riverside County, Paris has adopted such an ordinance, and Loma Linda would be the first city in San Bernardino County to be healthy by default if you were to adopt this ordinance. I think it has to do with the philosophy of Loma Linda City, and it will match very nicely with that philosophy. Now, we found out that there are about 13 different restaurants that have kids' meals bundled. So it will impact quite a few kids in this area. Do you have any questions? Am I forgetting something?
I've been talking to Yen Ang.
Yes, yes.
Okay. That's the same group?
We're the same group, yes.
Okay.
So if the Senate bill passes, it's right now in the Health Committee, you know, cities will strengthen it if they do pass an ordinance. That way the Public Health Department can, can check on the restaurants when they do their inspections. So it will have much more teeth if a similar ordinance is adopted by the city. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is William Arnold.
Good evening. Bill Arnold, President of the Loma Linda Chamber of Commerce. First, I'd like to congratulate Mayor Pro Tem Duper and Councilman Daly on their reelection. Appreciated working with you in the past and looking forward to many allocations in the future. Oh, good. I thought I'd get a little bit of a reaction from you. But at any rate, I do want to invite City Council and anybody here tonight to an event that we are having on June 29, the State of the Community Luncheon, our annual State of the Community Luncheon. It will be at the Town Place Plaza over on Waterman, where our awards and installation dinner was held as well. So we will begin at 11:30 and followed by a luncheon and then presentations from our different government officials and different things about what are happening in and around Loma Linda. So please, June 29, 11:30. Again, I just want to make that an official invitation. Yeah. Were you about to ask a question?
Yeah, quick question. Since you're up there, I'm just curious. Are we still planning on doing a parade this year?
We were going to package a parade with the Christmas tree lighting this last year.
And I know, and we decided not to do
But
that.
we did not do that. Again, just the function of pulling off that size of an event and closing the streets. It was right up against the Santa Run, or whatever. Anyway, the Lopers annual Santa Holiday Classic Run. So we decided not to do it, a lot of it having to do with the maintenance issues and street closings. So we just tried to up the sort of the Christmas tree lighting event with a very convincing Santa Claus and some other things in the tree lighting.
But for this year, I thought we were talking about doing something.
We did talk
Can we
about
put
it,
some money
but we
aside?
have not pursued that any further.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
We
it's good
have
to know.
not.
Maybe we need to
No, any
do something
past-
up from our end then. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, thank you for your support on that. All right, again, hope to see you on the 29th, and again, congratulations, and thank you for giving me a minute here.
Hey, Bill, just thank you very much, just to catch both you and Karen. You guys are doing phenomenal work, and we're really impressed with
Thank you.
how the chamber has
Thank you.
really grown the last couple of years, so.
Well, it
Thank you very
takes a
much.
village, and we've been very fortunate. Thank you for that, Phil.
Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Come on up. State your name and your address.
Donna Curtis, 26329 Cardigan Place, in the town of Redlands, but I belong in this area. Some of you may know that the section I live in down by the corner of Redlands Boulevard in California is part of the Loma Linda district. One of the questions that I have in regards to this expansion that we're doing, and are you required to put in more orange trees after taking so many out? Does that have to take place in the city of Loma Linda?
Your question is, are we required to replace the orange trees we're
Some
taking
orange
out?
trees. Not all of them, obviously, you can't do that, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, is there any requirements to put in additional orange trees once the building is done? And
If you're able to stay tonight as we discuss the project, and there has been some discussion about adding or bringing some specific trees back in some of the park space, right? Just as kind of a, kind of a signal to this is our heritage and where we
Yeah.
come from. But you also have to understand that we don't own those orange trees. They're owned by the property owners, especially where they're going down right now. So
Okay.
it's not us that's
Yeah.
taking them down specific,
Right,
but there is a plan and there is guidance here in town, and we're very much aware of our history and our culture, and we want to keep all that. So, and I used to live down the street from you.
Oh, you
I lived
did?
on Snowden for a
Oh.
number of years. Yeah. So.
yep, that's right behind us. And one other question, my neighbor and I have some concerns about the low-income housing population, and it seems to be greater than half of the quantity of buildings that would be available to the low-income housing, being as how it's practically right across the street from our neighborhood. We have some concerns about that. What thought has been put into that issue?
Where are you saying the low-income housing is?
Well, I was talking about this project, and the number that's on the document here is saying that we have about 258 units of low-income housing. Is that correct? And it seemed like that's a greater portion than the 253 remaining of the other types of, duplexes or apartments or single-family dwellings. Am I asking?
I don't think it's low-income.
We'll discuss that as we do the presentation, really.
Yeah.
We're kind of
Oh.
off track, and we need to keep
Okay,
the comments to the public hearing and
Okay.
not outside that.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, and another answer to the orange question.
Mm-hmm.
One of the projects is called the Groves at Loma Linda, so that gives you a hint of what the
Yes.
public right-of-way landscaping is going to consist of, orange groves. So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay, any other comments on any non-agendized items? Seeing none, then we'll move to item number 1, joint public hearing with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is sitting with us, and do you have to do anything official, or are you just, can I declare you open, or? Go for it. Okay, you're in business, okay. So we need a presentation from the Planning Department.
So this is the presentation for the Groves at Loma Linda, the specific plan, the public hearing. We're going to break this into a couple of different pieces. We'll start with the joint presentation and a joint public hearing. Melanie Traxler will do that. And then we will have the Planning Commission do their deliberation and recommendation to the City Council, and then the City Council to their deliberation and recommendation. So we have a joint hearing, Planning Commission, City Council action. So there's 2 separate actions for this. We're kind of compressing the time rather than doing it over a couple of weeks. We're doing it in one evening. So with that, Melanie is here to do the presentation.
Good evening, City Council and Planning Commission. Kyle, can I get the PDF up, please? I'm going to give I'm going to start with the presentation, and then at some point I'm going to turn it over to Karen Gully with Placeworks, who you met previously. And I just wanted to start off by addressing Mayor Rigsby's mention of the Groves. So actually, when we came up with the title for the Groves, it was kind of a dual function to recognize not only the orange groves, but also the oak woodland grove within the area too. So we thought that was kind of a clever duality of that. So I want to start by saying that the purpose of tonight's public hearing is, 1, to provide an opportunity for the public to comment and to provide and to testify on both the environmental impact report as well as the Groves at Loma Linda specific plan and the related general plan and zoning actions. Another purpose is for the Planning Commission and City Council to review and consider and take action on the components of the groves, and also the Phase 3 concept area, which is a sub-project within that. And then also to provide guidance to staff and on follow-up steps related to the implementation and administration of the groves. A brief overview of the public process and outreach that took place is back last fall, the City Council directed staff to initiate preparation of the Grove specific plan that occurred in the fall. And then at the beginning of this year, there were 2 community design workshops held, one on January the 9th, another on February the 13th, which was not a Friday, fortunately. And the planning team then also coordinated with with specific plan subcommittee members that were comprised of planning commissioners Jay Nelson, John Nichols, and City Council members Ron Daly and Ovi. I'm going to mess up your name. Popskew? Could you say it for me? Okay, sorry. And regarding various detailed components of the plan, which then went into the planning document. Through these workshops and the subcommittee's input, the preliminary land use plan and community objectives were identified, which were used to guide preparation of the draft specific plan. The public was then invited to provide input at both of those workshops, and in addition, the public was notified of the release of the draft environmental impact report, and they were invited to provide comment on the scope and conclusions of that document, as well as the draft specific plan. I'm going to speak a little bit about the what we can refer to as the CEQA process, California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA for short, and the environmental review. The city determined that an environmental impact report, or an EIR, must be prepared, and on February the 27th, a notice of preparation was distributed. An EIR was completed and circulated for a 45-day public review period that began on April 6th and ended on May the 24th. The city also reached out to the local tribes as required under Senate Bill 18 and Assembly Bill 52, and in compliance with the tribal consultation requirements. Many of the potential impacts related to environmental issues, such as geology and water quality and hazardous materials, were determined during preliminary review to be less than significant, and thus they were not further analyzed in the environmental impact report. However, the EIR identifies mitigation measures that would reduce all environmental impacts to less than significant for environmental topics, for all other environmental topics, except for certain issues related to air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. The draft EIR also considered alternatives to the proposed project, including the no project alternative. During the public review period, the city received 5 comment letters, and these have been incorporated into the response to comments final EIR document. Response to comments were circulated to the commenting agencies on May 31st, which is more than 10 days prior to this public hearing. And the final EIR is comprised of the following documents: the draft EIR, which was circulated, the response to comments, which was provided to public agencies, the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and all related notices, all those components of which have been made publicly available and provided to both the Planning Commission and the City Council for consideration. In addition to the environmental review public process, there has been a city review process. On May 7th of 2018, this year, the Historical Commission reviewed and provided comment on the historical components of the specific plan. Key concerns of the Historical Commission included: 1, the protection of the buried Zanja trail features, or Zanja features, protection and preservation in place of the Frink adobe, and general concern and consideration for several other historic structures that would be that are located on the property and would be relocated to Heritage Park. On May the 22nd, an informational community meeting was held before the Joint Planning Commission and the City Council. Issues discussed included a number of items, but in particular, a concern for an assurance that strict development standards for the very low-density residential area would be implemented. Discussion about the implementation and operational issues, including economic responsibility and ongoing maintenance for a potential lake feature within the North Park area, and also the maintenance and planning for other public and park uses. A discussion about proactive planning to minimize traffic issues in association with the future development of a middle school. There were also several other items that were raised, and in just a moment, Karen Gully will review those with you and discuss how we incorporated some of those issues into the specific plan that you're considering tonight. But before I turn it over to Karen, I just wanted to, for the benefit of the community as well as a means of review for you all, just to talk through some of the key features of the plan.
May I ask you a question? One of the issues we also discussed was that the developments that go in there will have HOA fees to ensure that the landscaping in the developments are maintained as well. And you didn't mention that unless I missed it.
I gave an abbreviated version of it.
And I accept that. I just wanted to be sure we don't, because having walked a few precincts now, it's on a lot of people's minds.
Well, and actually, I want to circle back a little bit later tonight on the issue of administration and implementation features, and hope to get some council guidance on that to direct staff to work out some of the specific details of that.
Okay, thank you.
So that was reading my mind ahead of schedule there.
Okay.
So again, I'd like to just review a couple of the key features as a means of review. And bear with me while I try and make sure I figure out how to use this thing. So what we have before you here first is this is the land use plan. And I'm going to focus more again on, since we've had a number of meetings discussing the design and all that, I'm going to focus more on how the plan will be implemented and administered. So talking about some of those features to help understand how these pictures will become a reality. So the specific plan establishes that build-out will occur through individual implementing development projects, which in this case are represented by planning areas. So each one of these rectangular polygons is considered a planning area. Each planning area is assigned a specific land use. It's hard to read on this map here, but it's available in the specific plan. Oh. Is he doing that for me? I'm not doing that, am I? Okay, thank you. It's assigned a specific land use, and also, thank you for pulling it up to the scale. An actual size, acreage assigned to it, a number of dwelling units anticipated for that particular planning area, and if there's a commercial component to it, also kind of an assigned number of commercial square footage. It's a requirement that each planning area must be comprehensively designed, and they're required to submit an application for and obtain approval of a precise plan of design and a certificate of appropriateness as a single site plan. So in other words, each one of these areas, even though maybe the property could be subdivided, each planning area is intended to be designed in its entirety before an approval gets made. And that's to ensure that all the issues such as sorting out the homeowners association, sorting out the common areas, all happens within a logical order. And as I mentioned, a certificate of appropriateness is going to be required, and that will go through the Historical Commission for review and then move on to City Council for approval, and that is because the entire property, the Grove specific plan area, falls within the historic Mission Historic District overlay. And so it until such point that somebody either comes in with detailed design architectural guidelines for an entire planning area, or as individual projects come in, they'll be required to go through that process. Next page, please. Thank you. This is the circulation and access plan map, and it lays out the major roadways that must be put into place to support the planning areas. It's anticipated or required that the major roadways go in a manner that's coordinated with the level of development that's going in at that time. So that'll be determined through the precise plan of design review process. This exhibit also shows areas where shared access, there's a requirement in the specific plan that shared driveways or shared roadways be developed between planning areas. The purpose of requiring shared accesses is to minimize curb cuts, especially along California, for example, rather than allowing each parcel planning area to have its own access. The idea of consolidating that is built into the plan. Also, because it's one of the objectives of Special Planning Area D and the city's general plan overall to require that this area obtain access internally rather than forcing individuals to go out on California and around. There is internal coordination. So reciprocal access requirements, for example, are required between several of the planning areas. And again, the Main Street up here, the Main Street District, serves as an overall reciprocal access for this northern portion.
I know it's much more efficient if we save our questions, and I'm saving questions, but to set context, it would help me to understand the different phases. Now, tonight we're talking, according to what I've been reading, phase 3 of the concept area. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what that includes. In other words, are you saying all the roads go in first and then development by development? But what are the phases that we're projecting at this point? So I have some context of what we're talking about.
Well, I can jump ahead to that if you'd like.
Well, if you're going to get there, then that's fine.
I will.
Okay.
Okay. So each planning area site plan must include the reciprocal vehicular and pedestrian linkages as required per the specific plan, and also each implementing development project or planning area must contribute toward its fair share of the master roadway and infrastructure improvements, as well as the parks and open space and trails plan. Next slide, please. Next page. There we go. This exhibit is of the pedestrian and trail system, and you can see that much of it parallels the major roadway system. The pink lines on here are sidewalks along the roadways that provide access, whereas the dashed lines, the dashed kind of brownish looking lines, will be decomposed granite trails. So the idea is to have the area served by a variety of pedestrian access options that pretty much get you to anywhere you want to go. And this segment here is referred to as the Paseo. So it pretty much extends from Mission Road south, will get you all the way up to the north area where the bulk of the mixed use and retail commercial uses would be located. I'll make a note, too, that we've made a provision in the specific plan for the segment of this trail system here that along mixed-use parcels, which are these here along California, that the trail can become what we call an urban trail concept, where it may not be an appropriate area to have decomposed granite, but if the site plan design for these is such that it warrants opening up onto the street, then the trail system could become a concrete trail that integrates within the front space of those buildings and the active public use area of those developments in that location. This also requires, and we paid special attention to this requirement, each one of these stars represents a reciprocal pedestrian access. So, for example, this site here is intended for a future middle school through the Redlands Unified School District. We wanted to make sure that residents within this component here would have some means of pedestrian access directly to there, rather than requiring that they have to go outside and come in. The same through here with the trail system coming up into the northerly mixed-use area north of Park Avenue. We wanted to make sure that there again could be some pedestrian access into the mission school site and through these mixed-use parcels, which will not only have retail commercial uses, but also a significant number of residential uses included within them. Next, please. This exhibit represents the open space and recreation plan, and so it illustrates the different levels of park and open space area. And as required within Special Planning Area D, the concept involves a centralized active use park area. So a project that was previously approved last year, the Citrus Trails Master Plan, which I'm going to give you a quick outline of that, is this area here. So pretty much all of this on the east. Kind of set up the framework for how the park system is going to work, with a 4-acre South Park down here, 13-plus acre athletic northerly park used for athletic fields, and again the Paseo concept is a connecting corridor running up central up through the project. And we already have this linear park in place on the perimeter of the VA Ambulatory Care Center. And with our Phase 3 project coming in, and I have a better map that will exhibit the phases as well, we're introducing now this Central Park area, and Karen's going to touch a little more on the park designs anticipated for these parks. And we have our Heritage Park off to the west over here. We anticipated also that the school sites represent a open space recreational component, and so that's indicated here, and it is part of the total count in terms of the acreage count for Special Planning Area D, since the school facilities take up a substantial amount of the acreage. And then also shown on here is a representation, approximate location of the Zanja Trail, where its precise location will be decided through the site plan design for each of those planning areas when they get to that level of detail. And again, perimeter trails with the what we're calling now is the California Trail, the decomposed granite trail along the Parkway area of California Street from the south all the way up to the edge of the school. And then we will also have kind of a similar Parkway trail integrated internal. Next, please. So I'm not going to go into all the technical detail of this exhibit, but this is kind of the master drainage. This is one component of the master drainage plan. And what this represents is how drainage within the area is, in general, drainage gets funneled this direction, but it gets picked up by all these receptor points. So each one of these squares represents a receptor point, or what we call a water quality treatment basin. And I wanted to point out that this was set up in a way to encourage sustainable practices, ensure good water quality, address high storm surface water runoff, as well as potentially function as an opportunity for some water conservation features. The plan includes the possibility for incorporating a lake within this particular planning area, or perhaps a smaller lake within here. And so the drainage is set up in such a way as to potentially capture that water and incorporate it into those lake features. Whether the lakes happen or not, we'll still have some means to capture that water and treat it within that area and integrate it into the plan. So I just bring this up to show that, illustrate first of all that the specific plan includes kind of a master plan concept for all the infrastructure, the roadways, the drainage, the stormwater collection, water service, sewer service. Next, please. So we talk about phasing in a couple different ways with this project, and there's when we talk about there's what we want. One thing we've referred to as a phase concept area. So there's a phase 1 concept area, which originally, as some of you may recall, was what we set up to bring in the VA facility in this area. So that phasing refers to a phase of special planning area D as defined through the general plan process. So that's one way we refer to phases, and I'll just walk through these real quick. And then phase 2 concept area is mostly this kind of orange indicated area, which again was the phase 2, such as trails master plan. And then our phase 3 area represents most of the successor agency property plus a few other private properties within this area. It also captures the Heritage Park and the property that is the mobile park facility. And then we have some areas that are kind of outside the phases, and it's just these 2 parcels, the Mission School parcel and the other parcel owned by Redlands Unified School District. And we refer to those as others right now because they are not otherwise, other than in institutional uses, they're not integrated into the plan. At some point, if they should disappear or go away or desire to become something else, then the specific plan would have to be amended to assign some other type of uses to those areas. But what this plan, what this particular exhibit is intended to show is how the phasing for infrastructure is to occur. So as I mentioned, as each planning area development or implementing project comes in, they're going to be required to install the facilities necessary to support them. So these are what we call infrastructure improvement districts. And so the idea is that any planning area that lies within one of these improvement districts is going to have to, as part of the development first ensure that the roadways within that planning area are provided, the major roadways, and the storm and water and sewer infrastructure hooked up. And so these planning districts or these infrastructure improvement districts align with those infrastructure master plan projects. So for example, when this area here, which happens to be our very low density area, if it were to come in to be developed first within this outlined area, it would be required for extending the roads to serve that area. It would be required for implementing the some mechanism for the stormwater and runoff capture to be held over here. So there's a level of coordination that has to happen to bring that in, and that's just to make sure that there's a coordinated way of putting that in, and there's a way for the city to ultimately take a step back and look at how to work with and assign cost sharing arrangements and coordinating that in the future. Okay, next. Okay, thank you. This particular exhibit is called the Community Structure Exhibit, and it's kind of similar to some of the exhibits that I've had up before because you'll see the key roadways through it. There's the same trails kind of set up. This shows also, though, how some of the area, how the whole specific plan area can be unified through some master design concepts. And so this demonstrates areas where we envision, for example, view corridors. These little symbols here represent view corridors. So the idea is that within the design guidelines of the specific plan, there's a special treatment required, for example, along Park Avenue to create a unifying theme. There's requirements in there to talk about corner treatments at key entry points or important entry points, such as this corner here at Bryn Mawr and Redlands, which is really kind of the main entryway into the groves, to ensure that that represents a level of identity and uniqueness, to let people know what they're about to enter, and to kind of set the tone for how development should occur within that area. Also on here I'll just make mention, there's an area that we refer to as a community use overlay. It's shown on here on the land use plan. We also introduce it over here in the Heritage Park area, and that's an overlay area for special treatment. It falls on, as it so happens, on the park property, but the overlay allows for non-traditional park uses to come in. So for example, we might see along this edge here and maybe incorporated around some water feature here, the idea of bringing in some commercial vendors for commercial entertainment uses, for example, betting cages that might be come in and be commercially operated, or some restaurants that fit within the type of community use within that area, or providing an opportunity for studio uses such as dance studio and yoga. Again, kind of community recreational uses that are well suited for being within or near within the park environment, that kind of have some compatibility there. So that's kind of an overview of the key features of the project. I'm going to turn it over to Karen at this point. We're going to take the PowerPoint back up and let her address some of the specific issues and questions that were raised last time.
Good evening, Mayor, member of the Council, Planning Commissioners. Great to see you again. So the focus of my quick presentation is really to kind of share with you what we did when we heard you last time and came back and made some edits for you. So let's start with the parks. This was a topic of considerable discussion last time. If you'll recall, we had one concept for Central Park that shows kind of a dry water detention basin along here that could be landscaped to become a natural amenity, and then handle stormwater when it needed to, as one option for the design of that park. The text itself talked about other options, including the incorporation of a lake. And at your request, we went ahead and did create another alternative that could show the incorporation of the lake. And as you can see, when you compare the two, we've kept kind of the community serving uses or potential restaurants the same. And when you get into the details that are in the specific plan, the same amenities are shown as well, slightly different design concepts. We wanted to provide a series of alternatives for how you could lay out the tot lots, the amphitheater, and the event park and event fair. So we've got a variety of options here for the future, for your future planners and designers to work with. But I wanted to make sure I brought that to your attention. And then we also included a number of character images that really kind of show the flavor for what can occur here at that park. The event center, outdoor event area, of course, could be used for any number of outdoor kind of activities for your community as a whole. The tot lots, the idea of a lake in a very naturalized setting, with the oak woodlands in the background and other trees around in the area. The trail system winding through, the incorporation of outdoor community-based uses, and more naturalized areas for picnicking. In relationship to North Park, which is going to be programmed for all sports, this is a much more passive park meant for families and others to come in and just enjoy the day. And then we've got some photos of how an amphitheater could be incorporated as an element along a lake. So wanted to share that with you. Melanie already talked a little bit about some of the changes we've made here, so I don't need to talk about that. The other key feature that we spoke a lot about was the Zanja Trail. And we went back into the historic reference design guidelines and incorporated a new requirement for that very low planning area, very low density planning area, indicating that future development has to identify the original trail and find a way to preserve it. And we've got a cross-section for what that could look like. And we're showing a number of options for how that could be done. The idea is it is preserved in place and not built upon. So now there's a requirement in the specific plan that will make sure that that happens. Then some of the other edits, let me go back here. Some of the other edits, we talked about parking and the demand for parking at these two parks. So what we've done, and while we originally were deferring to your current park standards or parking standards for your parks, we felt that given the unique mix of uses, it would probably be best for a future parking study to be prepared to kind of look at how those uses will be used, peak periods of demand, so that you don't over-park it, but you also don't under-park it. And that's going to require a little bit more of a specialized study. So now that's integrated into the specific plan. In addition, another topic of discussion was the very low density housing. And while we did already have a number of design guidelines related to the mixing of the elevations and the floor plans, for the very low density area, we included a new requirement: no two homes shall be exactly alike in the very low density planning area. And I think that even if this is a semi-custom home development, I think that perhaps developers can still achieve that without going all custom. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Melanie.
Kyle, I'm going to need my PDF back up. You can hold it. Okay, that's good. As long as this is up, I'll just mention. So this exhibit actually talks about those other concept phases that I was referring to, which is the phasing that we refer to in the general plan for implementing special planning area D. So this phasing concept, again, is different than the sequential phasing for infrastructure improvements. But before I come back to this, okay, I have to do my obligatory stuff about the EIR certification process, because this is very important. So, one of the items before you tonight will be the EIR certification and adoption of a statement of overriding considerations. So because the proposed project would result in significant unavoidable impacts related to air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, the City Council must adopt CEQA findings and a statement of overriding considerations prior to taking action on the proposed project. Council Bill R 2018-026 is a resolution to certify the EIR and adopt the CEQA findings and statement of overriding considerations. In addition to the standard EIR certification findings and adoption of the mitigation measures, the City Council may find that after balancing the specific economic, local, social, technological, and other benefits of the groves, that the unavoidable adverse impacts are considered acceptable as supported by the record. And these benefits are listed toward the back section of the statement of overriding consideration document, which should be in your packet. One of several large documents that are in your packet. So I'd like to just briefly review the requested entitlements that are before you tonight before we turn it over for questions. So as I mentioned, one of the first entitlements is the EIR, certification of the EIR and adoption of related mitigation monitoring program findings and statement of overriding considerations. Also, it's general plan number 18048, which is to modify the special planning area D text so as to define a Phase 3 concept area of 103 acres. And the Phase 3 concept area, again, is this area outlined in blue. It's 3 non-contiguous pieces. It's this large piece, the Heritage Park piece, and the mobile park piece. And that works in tandem with Phase 1 and Phase 2, which were previously approved and entitled. Next, please. As part of that, as part of the amendment to the general plan process, there's what I refer to as the infamous Table 2B. And so as these Phase 1, 2, and 3 projects have happened over the course of time, we've been working with the available acreages assigned within Table 2B. Now that we're into the Phase 3 implementation, we have kind of this situation where, you know, maybe there's a give or take of a planning use category, so we've had to make some adjustments to make the numbers fit, but we've held to the same requirements for park or not less than that. The housing numbers haven't changed. They have just maybe been moved around a little bit, but it meets all the basic requirements that are set forth in Special Planning Area D. And so this convoluted table shows you exactly what has changed over the course of time. But it's kind of messy to read, so if Kyle will take us to the next page. What I've done here is I've simplified that information. And so the table on the top really shows what has changed from a substantive standpoint. And that is that we have created a category for very low density that did not exist before, and we've assigned 30 acres to it and 60 units. We've removed, and we've also added a category of medium density, which we've now assigned a density range of 6 to 9 acres, and that's to provide for some diversity in the housing types. And we've assigned 12.5 acres to that with 103 units. And so to be able to accommodate those 2 new residential categories, we took that acreage out of the overall low density. And so if you were to actually take these acreages and these housing numbers, it still gives you, as kind of a whole, the same overall average of the 4 units per acre that we were working with. So it kind of balances out in that regard. And then the other key change was that back when Table 2B was adopted as part of the Special Planning Area D, it was never contemplated that the middle school site would be there. And so that's almost a 30-acre area that we had to figure out what to do with. And so we had to make some adjustments, again, within the areas. So we took acreage away from the retail mixed-use category and assigned that to the school, and then kind of balanced things out from that point in time. So that's why you have, again, a couple of the new land use categories added, and then that's how these numbers changed. But the bottom line hasn't changed, and that is that we're still at the 1,067 units with 213 allocated to senior and the 400 allocated to the mixed use area. And we've just, through creating these different additional residential categories, allowed for a greater diversity of housing types. And so once that gets totally cleaned up and worked into acreages, this now will become our Table 2B, and basically representing that Special Planning Area D is now fully committed per what was adopted originally when that was processed through, I think, as part of Measure V, that whole process.
This would be new housing or retail. It doesn't include the mobile home park, for example.
Actually, no, it actually does. So we took into account that there might be a point where the mobile home park becomes redeveloped. But the specific plan does not really force that to happen. And so actually, when you look at the land use plan has kept a housing assignment to that planning area, the RV park planning area, is pretty consistent with the number of units that are on there. And so the idea is if it were to go away, that a higher density residential project would come in to replace that. So it kind of keeps that in that area, and that really doesn't hold back the development of the rest of the area. It treats it as kind of its own.
So those mobile homes would be identified in the high-density residential or the senior citizen housing?
Actually, they are within the mixed-use component. So those units are part of the 400.
Okay.
And we can pull up, we can get back to the land use plan later, and maybe I'll just review some of these points shortly after I get through this.
Another quick question regarding if we're to follow state law, where it requires that we put in X amount, which I believe is 10% low-income housing, is that the right number? Does that mean that we would have approximately 100 low-income housing sprinkled throughout this development?
But we're over compliant.
Yeah,
for
but
the
this is
state.
new stuff.
Yeah, no, I know, but remember when when the county forced that other project down our throats,
We had a surplus.
we were given a surplus, so we actually have a surplus. So have we factored our surplus into this to make sure we're not putting in more low-income housing than we need to?
Well, actually, so the low-income housing, I'm going to call it affordable housing requirement, because there's a couple different definitions. And for the purposes of the specific plan, we've even kind of created this broader category of affordable and special needs housing, because there's a need for that also identified in the housing element. So the city's general plan is comprised of various elements, and one of those is the housing element. And the housing element, as you mentioned, needs to follow certain state requirements. And one of the state requirements is that every city must demonstrate that it's meeting its fair share of affordable housing requirements. So the last time, from what I can gather, and Conrad's happy to jump in if you'd like, I'm happy to have you jump in, but it's my understanding that the last time that the housing element was adopted, and I can't recall the exact date, that there was a question as to where affordable housing in the city should go. And not having a zoning category in place to accommodate the higher level of density that is needed, that can best accommodate affordable housing, it was determined through the housing element to put that into special planning area D. So when you read the city's housing element, there's actually a requirement, I believe it's 529 units within special planning area D need to meet that requirement to demonstrate consistency with your housing element. So we have the 400 units already within the mixed-use area, which was already assigned, that that can be built out to a density of up to 20 units per acre, which gets us where we need to be.
Okay.
And then if you look at treating some of the senior housing also within that category, we are then meeting our affordable housing requirement. And I want to say that it's there's like 84 units, so not all senior housing has to be that, or not all the 400 units need to be that, but somewhere within that there needs to be that 400. And it could also come out of some of the lower density too. So as long as that happens, the idea and one of the implementation features in the specific plan that we still have to kind of flesh out how we track that is that the opportunity to kind of transfer some of these back and forth, but just to make sure that we meet those numbers. And so that is kind of laid out in the implementation.
So the low income would be approximately how many units?
We have to have it, we have to have the availability for it.
Yeah,
I
It does
understand
not,
that part.
it does not necessarily, we actually have
this
to.
is
tag it at
fulfilling
this
RENA
point.
requirements, right?
It is
No,
part of the RENA
we-
requirements.
Yeah,
we
so
don't necessarily have to-
RENA requirements are to have enough land, high density enough
Correct.
to accommodate affordable housing, but it doesn't mandate you put affordable housing in.
That is
Well-
correct, and that's how we got to that 1097 number, so that we can still hit our requirements for the area and back into that and still have enough space for the affordable and the multifamily. Citywide, we are at a nominal surplus, yes.
Yeah, we approved a project behind the Poplar senior housing that is entitled, but was never funded and not built yet. Then we got 88 extra units on Van Leuven that we didn't plan on. So we are ahead, but we're way behind on moderate income, which is pretty much market units, so nobody really forces us to put those in. But for our low and very low, we believe we're 88 units ahead before any of Area D is developed.
Yeah, we are ahead by the number that's falling into the VA on the low and the very low, or sorry, the extremely low or whatever that category is, and very low. And like you said, the low in this market is moderate. So essentially market rate. Sorry, moderate is market rate. And then that would accommodate those numbers there. So organically inside special planning area D and the housing numbers in there, it will accommodate the low income requirements for the number of units that we have to have available for that. You don't necessarily have to designate them as such.
Well, there are some requirements within the specific plan, so I'll just adjust that. But if the city didn't have the surplus, then the requirement would be that those 529 units would be in here. If there's the ability, again, to demonstrate that those are accommodated, then it reduces that impact. But there's also a requirement that, and this comes from the general plan, for special planning area D in particular, one of the implementing policies is that a minimum of 10% of the units need to be for affordable housing. So there's the need to ensure that at least 10% of the housing within this area is that. And then we've added an additional requirement that at least a certain percentage of the housing within the mixed use area have to be a requirement of what we call for special needs. And that may or may not be affordable, but it could be, again, it's trying to accommodate and provide housing options for a wide range of needs within the community.
Just to complicate it a little more, can you define senior housing for me? What does that mean? That you can only sell or rent or lease to somebody that's at a certain age or above? What does senior housing mean?
Well,
because having walked precincts, we've got a lot of seniors in the city, and but they live in housing that fits one of these other categories. So what is senior housing, and what does it mean that we have to dedicate housing for seniors?
So to qualify as senior housing, it needs to be controlled and dedicated in some way to within a certain for an age limit over and above. You know, there has been some cases where, you know, if it's housing purchases ownership, then what happens when that senior person is no longer able to live in that facility? Can they pass it on to other individuals within their family? But I think that the senior housing that is being brought in as part of this project is intended to be for rental purposes, so that will make that a little bit easier. So it's dedicated, I believe it's for 55 and above, but I'll have to check the age limit. Karen probably knows that better than me. 55 and above.
And so those would all have to be single story then, or and
no.
When you say for special needs, is that special needs would be different than senior housing?
Yeah, so special needs could be different than senior housing. So first of all,
Or can they be the same?
They could be the same. The idea is special needs housing is intended to accommodate, you know, wheelchair accessibility, for example, or there might be some other physical handicap type needs to be met that could be accommodated through the way the housing is designed, or lower countertops, or so sometimes when you talk about the internal and physical design of the environment for senior housing, a lot of times it's just set up to make sure that you have the 3-foot wide hallways so that the walkers can get through and the wheelchairs can get through, which is a little bit different than dealing with people who maybe are younger and within a wheelchair that need to have lower built counters or need to have different types of accommodations for their private open space, for example. So
because 213 units, it's a pretty sizable part of what we're talking about here.
yes.
And I don't recall on the map of Area D just where we're dedicating senior space.
That's shared between both halves, too.
Yeah. Kyle, could you take us
Correct,
back
it
to the
is.
first page, please?
Actually, it is shared between Citrus Trails and the Grove, so.
And they've already got some stuff.
Actually, we're ahead of ourselves, but they're already talking about the senior to the south of the trailer park along Park.
All right, so this.
PA 2 and 3 is what we're
Yeah.
looking at for that.
PA 2-3 and 2-4. Originally, when Citrus Trails was approved, only PA 2-3 was assigned senior housing, and the other 4 acres was supposed to occur within the Phase 3 area that has been contemplated. When we were working out, as you recall, through the design workshops, trying to kind of figure out what kind of blobs should go where, it really started to make more sense that that the senior housing would go here, and the Citrus Trails proponent had also already come to the city and indicated that they wanted to carry their senior housing project over here. It made more sense for them to plan something cohesively within kind of a, more square layout that gave them better efficiency with their design. So that is one of the.
So are we talking about seniors who can live independently? We're not talking about Linda Valley Villa, for example.
We are talking about independent living and not convalescent. Convalescent falls into commercial use.
A comparable project would be like the Springs at Oakwood and Barton Road. In those, our personnel run into some of the special needs. They try to look at the first floor for those, although it's the multi-story complexes. They do try to dedicate some first floor space for those. It doesn't always work. We do run into them all over the place, depending on their occupancy, but this is typically what they try to do to accommodate both. But the Springs is similar to what we're talking about in terms of 55 plus.
And multi-level then, I assume, with that density.
This facility here, because of the density, really having to be built out at 25 units per acre, pretty much puts it at a 3-level facility. And it could be apartments, it could be condos potentially, or a portion of it could be condos. I don't know how they want to design it at this time in that regard.
So if I understand conceptually where we're at, we're looking at the overall plan of Area D, the Grove, and each of these individual developments will then come to us for approval through the plan via the Planning Commission, correct?
Correct. They're also going to have to require a certificate of appropriateness. So the order in which they do it, they could come through for design review first and then go back for the certificate. But the typical order is that they'll come in with an application for their precise plan of design and concurrently process their certificate of appropriateness. So to go to the Historical Commission for that historical component, move forward a recommendation. It'll then come to the Planning Commission for detailed design vetting.
Right.
And then their recommendation, along with the Historical Commission's, will then come to Council for final approval.
And any of those developments would be, approval would be contingent on meeting the overall design of the plan that we're talking about tonight.
Correct.
Actually, getting in the front door to begin the process would be contingent upon meeting the design.
Yeah, right.
The historic planning and council would be a modification and massaging of that. But should something not meet the basic requirements, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, okay.
Right, and Conrad's the gatekeeper there, and one of the things as part of implementation of the plan as a follow-up step is to assist staff in developing tools to be available to help interpret, to help track and monitor some of these nuance and issues and required number of this type of units and that unit, so that they'll have a way of demonstrating that and communicating that to each and every time that there's a, an implementing phase of this project. And as I mentioned, Conrad will be the gatekeeper.
Could you, therefore, the decisions we're making tonight are pretty critical, because that sets
Certainly.
the roadmap of what's going to evolve there.
Exactly.
And in that light, something that we also discussed briefly a few weeks ago, that for members of the public that are here or watching on TV, that I think bear repeating, and that is we have a lot of citizens that have become quite water conscious. So where would the water come from, and how would that impact the city? I mean, again, we talked about this last time, and I realize that. Why are we even considering putting water features in at this point?
Okay, so let me just start by...
Since that was an orange grove, I know there's...
Right.
It's got some special...
So let's talk about the water supply to start with. So the water supply right now, a good chunk of Special Planning Area D has been receiving agricultural water from the water district to irrigate the orange groves that have pretty much were taking up this area. Some of you may have noticed that, sad to see, but some of the orange groves in this area right now have been are in the process of being removed, and that's to facilitate the construction and sale of the property and design that's getting ready to now to happen within the Citrus Trails Master Plan portion, the Phase 2 portion. So when, as I mentioned, we did an environmental impact report, and we also did one for the Citrus Trails project before that was approved. And in the environmental impact report, we looked at water supply and to try and determine whether there was adequate water to service the area, or how did that fit with the city's water management plan, et cetera. And so turns out when you do the calculations on a per acre basis of what's used for the citrus groves, irrigation of the citrus groves, and we went back and actually looked at the water district bills to see how much water has been used. We know how much water is already being used on that site, and then there's a factor that you use for the number gallons of water per residential unit that comes in, or person within a residential unit or type of use. And we did a calculation for that and subtracted it from the current agricultural water use. And as it turns out, there's a surplus, meaning that there's a credit left. There's more water being used in for an agricultural purpose because the citrus is a higher water use than some other forms of agriculture. So we feel that from a potable water standpoint, it doesn't bring about any concerns, and that's factoring in the entirety of Special Planning Area D. So when you take in the other areas that weren't in the school coming in, it'll probably pretty much balance out, or perhaps still have a little bit of surplus left. So that's how the new development is going to be serviced with regard to potable water. But then there's the water for the irrigation, irrigation of landscape areas, not only the yard irrigation, but as you saw, there's a significant portion of public space in there that will be irrigated. So it kind of goes back to, is that, like you're watering for agriculture or whatever, but through the development process, there's the opportunity to bring in what we call purple lines, and purple lines provide reclaimed water. And the city has, I can't recall where the lines are, but it's either in California or in Mission, which one is, both, trunk systems set up in place for purple lines. So it really becomes just an issue of this project now tapping into the purple line system, and I believe it needs to get connected fully to the reclamation facility to actually bring the water in. So the specific plan sets up a requirement that non-potable water uses can be supplied through the reclaimed water that is already available to the city, and which the city has already planned for and looked ahead into providing and bringing into the city. So this will actually be a good project for really kind of kicking that off and getting it going. And then there's the third issue of water is like these lakes, if we have the lakes, or what to do with that. Well, you may recall the exhibit that I had up before with all the funny little lines with the drainage plan, but we had, you know, that big square box here and the big square box there. So as a whole, the city doesn't get a lot of rainfall on a regular basis to ensure that we have water keeping those lakes filled. But there still is the opportunity when you take into account, even when there is more of a intensified flash flood type of issue that comes in, you can capture some of that water and retain it for some period of time. Those water features, should the city choose to put them in as water features, can also be fed by reclaimed water to the extent that there's that there. And there's the ability to look at, you know, having that be a recirculating system. And so it's just getting really kind of topped off. So it does seem a little bit maybe counterintuitive to talk about, you know, bringing in bodies of water into that extent, but when it's engineered properly, they can actually be very water efficient. And it works, it has a broader role as part of an overall sustainability program functioning to serve as, you know, again, water quality management, part of the water quality management system, because the lake areas or even the dry creek stream beds, if that's the plan that we go with, will still serve as a filtration system for that process. So in the grand scheme of things, it may not be as water intensive as it seems because of these opportunities that are available and the opportunities for good engineering, and certainly having water as a feature can just be a bit refreshing in a very arid environment, and so that's one way to look at it.
Thank you. Just to add briefly that in considering the landscaping of the parks, and especially the athletic side of that park, the complex, it seems like I'm seeing a lot of cities and public entities use artificial turf for sports fields, soccer fields, baseball. That would be something that would also minimize the water usage on that particular section of large chunk of land there too, that could further reduce the need for this whole region's water.
Well, certainly that's an option, and when the city gets to the heart of, you know, doing the detailed design for those parks and determining what the active uses are going to be, that could be something that could be looked at. And even if the whole park is not done in some type of artificial turf, there might be certain fields that are better suited for it. And so it's to sort out, you know, what might be appropriate for that. And it's my understanding that the artificial surfaces have, you know, come a long way from where they were 20 years ago, that the type of injuries you used to see are not as prevalent. So I think that that's helpful too. I have just a few more items on the entitlements to wrap up then. So Kyle, can you kind of take us back to where we were? There we are. Okay, yes. One more. Perfect. Okay, so that entitlement that we were just talking about with the table and the phase 1, 2, 3 concept was the amendment to the general plan. So now we have amendments related to zoning and to this plan that's called the East Valley Corridor Specific Plan, which runs along Redlands Boulevard. So right now, a portion of our project site, we've been kind of chipping away at this. A portion of the project site falls within the East Valley Corridor. I'm sorry, this map's a little bit fuzzy, but everywhere you will see EVC kind of here in the background. When Citrus Trails Master Plan came in, we already, as part of that approval process, we bumped that boundary back so it was excluded from that area. So part of the approval process now is to exclude the rest of it. So we're just basically going to move the boundary. Instead of being here, we're just going to move the boundary straight up to Redlands, so that the entirety of Special Planning Area D, or now the Groves, will be outside of the East Valley Corridor specific plan area. And in doing that, we have to assign zoning now that matches the city's zoning. So consistent with the city's mission district overlay requirement, we're looking at putting in a mixed use zoning there for sort of planned community, which functions as a mixed use. And with the exception of Heritage Park, which is already zoned open space, the entirety of this will become planned community. And then the 2 school sites will become zoned consistent with the city's zoning for institutional and healthcare uses, so that there is some zoning in place for should those develop in the future, even though those agencies technically are not required to follow the city zoning. So,
And in a nutshell, the purpose that is, the Redlands Corridor strip has a different zoning than the rest of the city, and different land uses, different parking, different structures. Everything's different than our zoning. It was a joint zoning done with Redlands, Colton, San Bernardino, and Loma Linda many years ago. And what we're doing is taking this out of that joint area that has different rules and bringing it back home to the city and putting it into our rules so that we can be consistent throughout the city.
Can we name it something specific, or?
It just now becomes city zoning. One of our projects out on the horizon is to get rid of that East Valley corridor from end to end and then apply consistent city zoning throughout. It makes it really complicated to have this, properties that are straddling like this and then have 2 separate zonings, even though it's the same allowed use.
And we can just do that.
Well, just do it is a little flippant, but yes, we can accomplish that, yes.
it can be done. It's a bit of work.
Because there is concern in this community about how we address our planning, and of course we have Measure V, which is a big controlling factor in a lot of this stuff. So just to alleviate any concerns anybody that's out there, this is not fundamentally changing anything or subverting any of that stuff.
It's the exact opposite. It is taking it out of a regional zoning with regionally unique needs, placing it into the city zoning that's specific to the city needs and our feel and character. Parking requirements are different between the two, and landscaping and parking lot requirements are different, which provide a different visual feel. And so what we're doing is providing that consistency throughout the community, and this is where we're starting with that.
In general, the East Valley Corridor plan's a bit outdated, and so this does provide an opportunity, whatever path the city goes with that in the future. But I will point out that the previous zoning, the lighter blue blobs here, is within the East Valley Corridor. It was for what they, a category that they defined as special development, which is kind of the equivalent to the city's PC zoning. So as it turns out, one of the things when you switch zoning that you're concerned about is trying not to create what we call a non-conforming condition. You want to apply a zoning, if there's uses there already in place, that captures those uses so they are not now non-conforming and inconsistent. So there is no nonconformity created through this process, and that's explained in the ordinance as part of the findings. So even though when the VA Phase 1 property went through, we specifically zoned it this, now having it as PC, because the VA is already built out, there's no inconsistency there, and that use would already be allowed under the PC. And within the specific plan, we've built those uses in too. So the specific plan, our specific plan, the Groves, now gives us the ability to ensure that that everything is consistent under that zone, and everything fits, whether it's an existing use there or a potential future use. All right, I'm almost done. So that's thank you, Kyle. And so then an additional entitlement request is a zoning amendment to 17193 to adopt the Grove specific plan specifically. Oh, so that was the cover over that before. That's what we'll be adopting. And then as part of that, we've created now a placeholder in the city's zoning code to actually call out the specific plan, so the specific plan becomes codified. So it's not just some plan on a shelf, it's part of your ordinance. So there is a requirement that when development comes in, even though we don't have a specific plan zone, it's the planned community zone, but it's within the specific plan area now set up and incorporated into the ordinance. Next slide, or next page, please. And then one more. Keep going. There we go. And then within, because we're, as I mentioned before, because we had these phases before, and specifically the Citrus Trails Master Plan, the Citrus Trails Master Plan accomplished through a master plan process much of what we are already doing with the specific plan, the Grove specific plan. So by adopting the Grove specific plan, the city has made a decision to have this specific plan apply to the entirety of Special Planning Area D. And in order to avoid a situation where we have multiple layers of plans going on, the approval for zone code ordinance 18050 is to amend the previously approved plan development permit number 15087, which was for the Citrus Trails Master Plan, in order to integrate the Citrus Trails Master Plan now as part of the Groves at Loma Linda specific plan, and to amend certain aspects of that specific plan to become consistent with and direct its future implementation through the Groves specific plan. So essentially, that's an action to basically say that while the Citrus Trails Master Plan is there and it exists, that the Grove specific plan now becomes the implementing document and the reference document. So it'll streamline that process. It'll make staff much easier or much happier to deal with it. It'll make our implementation plan, which looks at collectively the master roadways that fall through all of this, and the park plan, which affects all of this area. It'll make it much easier for us to come up with an implementation plan and administer this in a consistent way for all the properties within Special Planning Area D. Okay, one next slide page, please. So this is a summary of those 5 motions for the 5 entitlements that I just walked you through: the certification of the EIR, the general plan amendment, the zone change out of East Valley Corridor to proper zoning, the actual adoption of the specific plan itself, and then the amendment of the Citrus Trails Master Plan, previous approval, to integrate it into this. And then there's a 6th motion on the next slide, please. There we go. That I would like to ask you to consider, and that is to provide staff with direction on what we can do to finalize the plan. So the hearing draft that's before you tonight could use a little bit of a QA/QC cleanup within it. It also has some areas that perhaps could be consolidated and streamlined to eliminate some of the redundancy and to ensure good cross-referencing between the document. There are some placeholders in the text, specifically in Chapter 5, where we've pointed out that how the plan could be administered and implemented needs to be worked out at the staff level and incorporated into the final plan. So whatever direction the Planning Commission and City Council would like to provide staff tonight with that as we wrap that up would be appreciated. And the part of the motion to direct the finalization of that document to be coordinated directly through the Community Development Director, since it's really just kind of working out the details of how they will implement and process that plan. So with that, that concludes my staff report, and happy to answer any other questions, or Karen, or.
There was a section in the report I remember reading through on the CD that had allowable land uses for the different zones that I didn't see you go through, that I had some questions on. there a way to pull that up, or?
No, I don't believe that we have that
Don't believe you have that.
file on
We
here.
can speak to your questions. I don't know that we can
Yeah.
put it up on the board.
Excuse me?
We can speak to your questions. I don't know that we can put it up on the projector.
Yeah, I just noticed some, what I thought were kind of awkward inconsistencies in allowable land uses on the 4 different types of zonings. That just seemed awkward. But is there an opportunity to do that at a separate meeting, Conrad, where we kind of drill down on some of that kind of stuff? Or are we approving all of those allowable land uses, building uses now?
Well, one of the options actually that I can throw out to, for you to consider as part of that item, motion number 6, as part of the cleanup. Thank you. As part of the cleanup items is that you can either direct staff to go through and try and catch some of these inconsistencies, or we can continue to work, perhaps one follow-up meeting with the subcommittee in terms of addressing some of those inconsistencies. So, I mean, it's up to the council's pleasure how they want that to happen.
Or would direct us to take it back to planning commission as, independent of city council. So there's a couple of ways we can attack this. And we've done it on the planning commission level several times where, commission direct staff to kind of clean up the loose ends, and that's a pretty common thing.
If there's an opportunity to do that, I can forego my questions or concerns on that tonight.
Or we could just reach out to members individually. So however we get directed, the idea is that the nature of the changes are not substantive, they're cleanup, so that we're really not changing the integrity of the plan that you're considering and potentially taking action on tonight.
I also heard you mention when you went through the different parcels and you talked how they'd come to us, in sort of different proposals. You talked about some level of coordination that would be done between the different parcels, but I was looking for something a little bit more, that would require, individual parcels coming to us to actually coordinate with the surrounding parcels. That we'd see some connectivity, some ability to make the adjacent landowners, kind of comply with sort of momentum that was building, that we wouldn't be seeing little inconsistent parcels coming at us at various stages depending on the market and whatnot. I don't know if there's any
possibility. What we tried to do is with the specific plan, so that the plan itself provides that consistency across the different planning areas. And then if you saw the phasing map that Melanie had, the different blocks of area, that those parcels that are logically contiguous and logically become one type of development, they do have to come in as one group. So the overarching document provides kind of the tone and flavor and feel for it, and then because we have these larger parcels that come in as one developed parcel, we're not really picking off little pieces. We're still under that umbrella, and that piece that then is developed along that flavor.
So that was my misunderstanding then, Conrad. I thought each individual parcel could come at us. You're saying every parcel of similar kind of use would come at us master planned at one time?
No, every parcel, regardless of when it comes at us or how it comes at us, will come under the umbrella of this specific plan that you are approving tonight. So therefore, it must be reflective of the elevations, the land use, the setbacks, the type of parkways, the type of trees, all of this stuff that's placed in there. And then inside that box, there can be some variability. But the consistency throughout the entire project is held through this document. And Melanie's gone through the trouble to codify this. So she actually made the comment earlier that I'm the gatekeeper. That's really not true, because it's codified, and all I have to do is point to the code. I'm not really the gatekeeper. The code already is.
Yeah, I want to point out if in the specific plan, starting on page 4-18. So 4-18 is that community structure plan. You may recall we had that up before, and it has these various symbols on it. These are some of the elements of the plan overall from a design standpoint that are used to unify the area. And you may recall back when I had we had the master trails plan up and the roadway plan that showed the arrows between parcels. So these are all things that are already built into the plan. There's a lot of thought that goes into these really simple looking diagrams. to ensure that some thoughtfulness is given when a planning area does come in, that, hey, this is a reminder, this plan shows that you have to have a shared access with that. So that coordination has to happen. And then also within Chapter 4, again, starting on 418, following that map, there's what we refer to as the planning area development pages. And so this is a series of pages by planning area, by planning area where, so this is, for example, is planning area 1. And each one of these has the same components as you flip through the pages. There's one for each planning area where it talks about what is the vision for that planning area. There's a little diagram in there that is an excerpt from the community structure plan that has all these community structure elements that illustrate what this one has to comply with to make sure it fits within the overall bigger picture. And then as you go through some of the sub sections within each one of theirs, it talks about how it has to relate to the surrounding planning areas as well. So a lot of that is built in there, and from an administrative standpoint, they're going to have to demonstrate consistency with this, and that's how we'll ensure that that level of coordination you're talking about happens.
I'm satisfied with that. The last little minor thing I had was on the Paseo. It looked like you had a very sort of dedicated land use parcel sliver that moved up from the low-density housing right up to the Central Park area, and then it kind of vanished as it moved through the park, and then we kind of pick it back up with a little Oak Grove area, and I wondered if there was any benefit in being more specific and definitive on that little sliver of land to make sure there's a true Paseo that does continue all the way up to the retail area along even the west side of the Oak area, just a real defined Paseo. That could be more specific, or what were your thoughts there?
Kyle, can you take us maybe to around like page 4 or 5? Let's see what it looks like there. Keep going.
There it is.
One more.
No, that's okay. Well,
there we go. You need to see this one. I'm sorry, it would be nice to see the park and the trails overlaid on each other, which you can't tell from this one.
So you've got the trail. It's just going back one slide and defining the.
So we'll do this one first.
P2-17 or PR.
So the trail is here. The trail does show the continuity, and we've even worked in special pedestrian crossing. So we want to see a very special pedestrian treatment here, so that this Paseo becomes truly a corridor. It becomes not only a recreational component and a passive open space component, but it becomes a functional way to get from point A to point B up through here and back. So the trail system does go through, even though the parks are here. And then, Kyle, if you could take us to the next page, please. There we go. And so what you're talking about, right, is that we have this planning area sliver here. It's its own planning area through this point, and then it becomes the park. So, but you have to recognize that overlaying on this is still the trail system, and that when the parks are ultimately designed, there will be attention given to this trail system. And when you get into the design guidelines of the document, again, to each one of those planning area concepts, if you were to look at the planning area development standard page for 2.6, for example, it should talk about how the Paseo continues there along the west edge and how that's integrated into the park design to make sure that
So you feel there's adequate language that defines that we don't need to develop a specific planning area designation that would more clearly define that? You think it's adequately?
Yeah. And unfortunately, we were kind of a little bit stuck with what happened from the Citrus Trails Master Plan, because from a planner standpoint, I would have maybe liked to have seen it a little bit differently. So we came up with a patch for that.
So that I'm clear, that sliver comes in with the two park areas when those get developed, correct?
The sliver?
Yes.
This is so this will be the trail system through here, and just part of the reason this is set up this way too goes back to the issue of, again, implementation administration, which I'm hoping you'll direct staff to work out some of the nuances of this. And for example, you know, this could be a public park down here and public park up here, but the idea is that the Paseo itself would be managed as a privately through the homeowners associations associated with this development, that they'd be responsible for the management of this, because Citrus Trails has incorporated their drainage system as part of the Paseo area and as part of the property. So it could be privately maintained versus publicly maintained. So there's some of those issues, again, dealing with administration and financial responsibility that kind of fit into how that got split up.
Just to clarify, since that project has already been approved, are they aware of the fact that there may be some fees associated to maintaining this Paseo?
We've discussed with them extensively, because they're at the tail end of closing escrow for the sale of that, and they're aware that anything that they're dumping and using for drainage becomes part of their HOA or their landscaped assessment district.
Okay.
And that very clearly is something that's part of their responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
While you have this map up, one of the things, again, we discussed, but we haven't addressed it tonight. I just want to be sure there's a plan that we're convinced will work for traffic flow in the morning for this middle school and then in the evening.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
I can see a potential loop, but it's not going to all happen on its own.
Well, right. So I'll start with this, is that, you know, early on when, in the fall, when we were sent to embark upon this process, the planning team reached out to the Redlands Unified School District because we wanted to know more about what was going on with this middle school site. We'd heard some mixed things about how far along it was in terms of its design. And at that point of time, they had kind of a conceptual plan pulled together that, because they didn't know what was going to be happening over here, and they just assumed that they needed to plan in a vacuum because they didn't know who they could coordinate with. And they had all of their school access coming out onto Mission Road, so things were in and out. But also, when this property was sold to them from Lewis still owns this area here. Part of that sale agreement required that Lewis had to provide an 84-foot right-of-way access easement through here. So that gave the school the right to come in through here and then through here. But again, the majority of the access was intended to occur off of there. So we found in meeting with the school district that they were very open and very cooperative and open to hearing other ideas because the design was not finalized. And they actually welcomed an opportunity to look at how they could come up with a better access option, how to better orient the school, how to fit it in. They wanted to know what we could do to assist with just overall ease of accessing, even, as I mentioned before, you know, putting some thought into these pedestrian connections too, because that could help minimize traffic, especially along Mission, if there were other ways to get in there, even with foot traffic, because when you have, you know, students living over here and there's no physical connection to get over there, somebody's going to come out to California, they're going to come down, and they're going to, you know, it just forces them onto the road. So back when we had the design workshops back in January and February, and we were contemplating how to make this piece fit, we came up with this concept of extending, allowing park to extend, utilizing the fact that we had a right-of-way access already dedicated for that, and potential extension here then with a citrus that could come through, with the idea that there could be an internal roadway system there. And we talked to the school district about possibly then considering a limited access off of Mission, so that the Mission access would not be for drop-off. It would be perhaps just access for staff, getting into a staff parking area along here, or it would be a one-way in and out type of thing. So there would be some restrictions on that access, and that would allow a safer pedestrian environment along Mission, as well as minimize potential roadway conflicts. So that is the idea, is that we've created some kind of a loop system in here, and that ultimately, when the school works with on their design, and we would hope that they would coordinate with the city to help come up with the best layout that works with the circulation system that's been contemplated here.
But to complete that loop and any other parking areas or entrance from Mission would all come out of the school district planning, out of their property.
Correct. Yeah, it wouldn't, like the connection would not be
Right.
here, the drop-off, no,
Right.
it would all be contained on their
Okay.
property.
Okay. And what's, I mean, I guess this is for the school district to think out, but I'd rather be talking about it now than after the fact. I can see if all of the traffic entered on Park Avenue and then looped out of Citrus, that could work, but what's to keep people, or is there a plan to keep people from both entering Park Avenue and Citrus and have a log jam in front of the school? Are those going to be one-way streets, or how's that going to work?
Well, they're not going to be one-way streets. One of the options that's available, for example, with Park, is to actually have it cul-de-sac here and just have a driveway in. So we're not really sure how that could work from this segment. That's where kind of the detailed site planning, when that happens, we'll kind of sort that out. But it could either be a one-way system in, or it could be one-way in during certain times of day. Again, I don't know enough at this point in time without knowing, for example, the hours of the school. The school, for example, it talked about, we call it a middle school, but they're also contemplating the potential that it be a K through 9. So there would be different hours.
So do we have any sense of how many students we're talking about, students and staff?
I don't.
It'll be probably about 1,000 or a little over, between 1,000 and 1,200
So
students.
that's a lot of cars that are going to be coming and
At the
going.
meeting in February, the school district official that was there at our public meeting got beat up pretty good, because we had a lot of residents from this area that attended that particular meeting, and they made their voices pretty clear that this was not as much of a benefit to the community as the school district believes it to be. But the other thing that was discussed was that the school district admitted that, remember, this is other areas will feed this school. This is not just residents of Area D that will be going to school there. There will be students that will be coming from north of the freeway in San Bernardino area. They'll be coming from Redlands, from all kinds of other places. So it was actually discussed that probably most appropriate for them would be some type of access off of Redlands Boulevard and Bryn Mawr, because a lot of folks that may be coming in and out of here are going to be hitting the freeway to come and go back to work. So, especially if drop off. But again, that's all just, I mean, that's so far down the road. In fact, that guy indicated that they were still probably 10 years away from even discussing this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what they've told you, but that's my recollection from that meeting.
That is consistent, that they are not at a point where they're even ready to start planning and design. And even when they get to the planning and design, it's still, 5 whatever years out before construction actually happens. So they need to have some level of, student need built up to fund the potential project. So there's a question, we had talked about this at some of the design workshops, what are some other options for this property, and is there a better place within the city for this area to go? And that's still an option that can be explored.
I'll do a quick plug for anybody that's out there. We have long needed a resident of Loma Linda on the Redlands School District Board. So anybody who's interested out there, think about those
Forms
things.
in the back.
Because in all seriousness, we've been a member of the school district for years and years, and it's a great district. It really is phenomenal. But we have an opportunity. We should get a Loma Linda resident on that board.
And so when and if that does happen, at that point, some of these more detailed circulation options can be looked at. We did talk about, is there a possibility for an easement here or some other type of access. So I think that just will have to be explored when that happens. So I think you can feel assured that the Groves as a plan has done the best job it can to try and accommodate the possibility of a school being there and trying to protect the surrounding area and the roadways from the congestion.
Okay.
Earlier, you had mentioned that there's going to be a traffic study done on this area. Is that going to incorporate the anticipation that there's going to be a school there?
Well, actually, the traffic study was completed, so, and
A parking study is.
Oh, is it
a parking study, yeah. Okay. So the traffic study is part of the, is incorporated into the environmental impact report, which you'll be considering with your recommendation tonight. And so Measure V, as many of you know, requires that when new development goes in, that traffic impacts and level of service must be mitigated to maintain the level of C or better. And so that is what the traffic study considered, and it took into account the potential for a school being there as part of the overall background cumulative growth condition, and still provided mitigation measures to address that level.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question. That on the diagram, you've got those little circles at the intersections. Does that mean those are roundabouts, or is that just indicating an intersection?
Well, originally, the idea was that they could be roundabouts, and it's questionable whether the city would want to put in roundabouts. In some communities, roundabouts work well. They're a nice design feature, traffic calming opportunity, a way in a busy intersection to keep traffic flowing. But I've heard that perhaps that may not be from an engineering standpoint and direction the city wants to go. So what we've done within the plan is kind of like the lake feature. We've allowed for the option. So the planning areas are configured and the roadway is configured to allow for the right-of-way option at those two particular key intersections. But ultimately, when the detailed design happens, this could get straightened out. These don't have to be roundabouts. We still are encouraging that the right-of-way be maintained, and even if it's a straight-through intersection, that this additional kind of land configuration, which creates a nice intersection appeal and pulls the pedestrians a bit away from the flow of traffic, might still be designed in a way that it accommodates the ability to use that area for some pedestrian safety features.
I guess I don't understand the downside of roundabouts. I mean, I see more and more of them in various cities I've been to, and they work well. And they've been in Europe and Asia for decades.
Well, there's a lot of positive things about them. I think it's just ultimately going to come down to the final engineering design. So we've allowed for the option of both.
Okay.
Again, from a design standpoint and traffic safety flow, they have a lot of positives.
Yeah, I would think so.
I'd like to chime in. Councilman Daley touched on phasing, so I'd like to expound on that.
Certainly.
So in the spirit of clarification, I'm going to focus in on PR 3-4, which is being called the lake area, whether it be dry, et cetera. So clarify, that can be or it will be used as WQMP retention function?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, so in the spirit of analyzing phasing, please clarify that any upstream flow that needs that the phasing of the development of that retention area, whether it be temporary or permanent improvements, is addressed.
It is addressed. Kyle,
Such as, any parcels in phase 2, for example. and/or if anything upstream in phase 3 needs that retention area.
All right, well, let's stick on this one for right now. So, as it so happens, this particular exhibit is the infrastructure implementation districts. And so it sets up exactly kind of what you're talking about. So for example, see this broader blue line here? This defines District B within the Phase 3 area. And so that's because the reason this is a larger blue area instead of, for example, just this or just this, it's more than just one planning area. And the reason is that the way drainage works is that, and the way the drainage plan is set up, is that if this area, for example, is developed first, the drainage needs somewhere to go. And according to the master drainage plan, it needs to go here. And so you can't have this area developing without somewhere for the drainage to go. So the idea is that each one of these districts functions as a, in this case, as a drainage unit when we're talking about drainage. It also so happens that it functions as a sewer and water service unit. When you kind of look at those plans, it works out pretty well in that regard. So that's why if any planning area within one of these districts happens, because the drainage is managed within this overall thing, they're going to have to sort out the drainage. And so it's possible, for example, if 3.6 or 3.5 were to go in before 3.4 gets developed with the water quality feature within that, that drainage could go on here as a temporary way, that there might be some temporary basin before the final basin goes in and the park area gets designed. So that's just all part of the engineering detail that comes out of the precise plan of design and the improvement process. And so, Kyle, could you go back to the one just before this? So, so again, this kind of shows how that happens. And so within the Citrus Trails master plan portion, I should be calling that Phase 2 now, they had a series of smaller drainage areas set up so that they worked it into how they intended to do their phasing. For our phase, for the Phase 3 area that the city is now just designed, we're looking at a kind of a grander scale because the city has control over, or potentially has control over more of that property, and so that's why some of these areas have been, take into a larger consideration and consolidate the water retention and water quality basins rather than spreading them out as they did for Citrus Trails. So we've handled it a little bit differently in that component, but that's how that will happen. And yes, it'll get engineered out, and we've thought ahead to how that can happen to ensure that the upstream areas are all that there's an upstream place for the downstream stuff to go and vice versa.
Thank you for that clarification. I figured that you did have it handled. I just wanted to clarify.
I hope it was clear.
It was working, and it sounds like it works.
Couple of other questions. When we talk about, and again, this is something we talked about before as well, and that's parking for the parks, and that we're going to have a study done so that we don't underpark or overpark the area. I think that's a great idea. When is that going to happen? Because that's going to have to be built into this phasing as well, I would assume.
Yeah, so actually, it'll happen at the time that the park plan areas get developed. And you may recall the exhibit in the PowerPoint that Karen had up before with the park alternatives, for example, for Central Park. And there's park concepts also for the North Park and the South Park, as well as Heritage Park within the specific plan as well. And each one of those includes a parking component within the design plan. And so it's just kind of roughed out based on Placeworks' extensive experience with, understanding parks and uses and the level of activity. So, for example, the parking need at Heritage Park is pretty different than how we would calculate the parking need in and around the North Park area, which might have, up to 8 different athletic fields on it, based on the concept plan. That's how large that area is. Mm-hmm. And so in those concept plans, you'll see that the parking is integrated, and there is available street parking around all of the parks as well. And within the Central Park, the concept includes several different parking areas, little parking niches in and around to accommodate some of the special uses that are within that too. So when the concepts, we've really jam-packed the parks with a lot of activities and potential uses, and whether or not that's what the city chooses to implement, because ultimately the city will design its own park, is yet to be seen how you decide to do that. And that's where some of the financial considerations will come into play, some of those issues under that motion number 6 that I mentioned, that I hope that we can, direct staff and some team of individuals to look into how to handle the financing of the implementation, construction, design, and maintenance of those areas. So at that point in time, when we know what activities are really going to go in there, then we can come up with a parking plan that matches that. If there ends up being only 4 athletic fields instead of 8, that's a different situation. So we would want to make sure that those align at that time.
And the same would be true for the water feature too. When it's time to do specific planning is when the decision will be made on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Very good presentation, by the way, I enjoyed it, very comprehensive.
Thank you.
It's kind of a little outside of the scope here, but what, do you know what the plans and the phases are on the other side on how that's all kind of coming in? Just kind of might help us kind of understand as far as when we're looking at those parks and any of that kind of stuff. Because that first half will probably come in when they're totally done, right?
Are you talking about Citrus Groves?
Yeah.
Is in escrow now, so they're doing some of the infrastructure planning, street, sewer, that type of thing. It looks like, and this is more speculation than discussion, that the northern piece, that PA 2.3 and 2.4, will be the first ones to develop. And then they'll probably have to bring in Park and Citrus and the connecting streets, just because those, under those streets is the sewer and water and storm drain, all the stuff that goes with it. And then they'll probably work from the north to the south. But that's, that's more speculation than reality, because they're going to have to start like Melanie said, they have to start picking off upstream stuff and build that direction.
And so when it comes to the parks themselves, so the Citrus Trails Master Plan, when it was approved, we were concerned about when parks, we didn't want parks to be an afterthought at the end for a couple of reasons. We didn't want it to be just not there and available for the citizens and community. And also, we didn't want the developer to be then long gone and not to have the ability to come in. And we also wanted to make sure that, again, the parks were designed in a way that was well integrated with the uses as they go in. So, so that the community would be open to the, open up to the parks and not just turn their backs to them. So actually, the Citrus Trails Master Plan sets up a park implementation program that that requires, for example, this northern half of the North Park to come in in the timing, Karen's probably more, I think it was like the first 50 units. Does that seem right, Karen? So after the first, within the phase 2 area, once 50 units are installed within here, and it was like, I think 581 units overall, that's when this first half of the North Park will come in. And then there's another trigger point after 100 or 150 units that the remainder of the park comes in.
That's pretty quick then. If PA 2, 3, and 2, 4 are going in first, that accomplishes your 50 units.
That would come in very quick. And as part of that trigger too, they have to deed some land over if we select it for fire station location and other things as well. So those triggers will happen fairly early. And
Part of this is, I was curious too, is you're trying to figure out based on where they're taking the trees down, what sections are going where, but.
They're taking the trees down in the entirety. The areas that still have trees are because they have nesting birds there.
Except the oak trees.
Except the oak trees. But they have nesting birds there that they have to allow the nesting to hatch, and then they can take the trees out, so they're not destroying various species of birds.
The oak trees are up here. So most of the oak trees are actually off-site of Phase 2, except for this little square here.
That's a good question, because, we're fielding a lot of questions.
Right.
I just had one earlier from the audience about
Yes.
the trees, so they're gonna take them all out for the whole.
So everything that was in the Phase 2 area, Kyle, can you take us a couple toward the end?
As far as the orange groves, by the time we're done,
Go back there.
at the end, those groves will all be gone. There will be some citrus left as historic monument pieces. Citrus, the Heritage Park will have citrus groves. Part of what we've incorporated with this and is required through the State Department of Agriculture is this is prime agricultural land. So there has to be, I believe it's an acre for acre basis. This land is taken out of production someplace in the state. Groves will be planted and put into agricultural preserves, not necessarily locally. Most of that's happening in Central Valley. But there will be agricultural land set aside for the loss of this agricultural land.
Purposes, just general questions, so the city designated area right now, which we're obviously losing control of soon, but all of that, our groves will probably be in place there for a while, because we're not looking, that land probably won't be sold or manipulated for a while.
Correct, there's no.
With any luck, we can get that on the market fairly quickly. The
But
groves.
it's all dependent on the market, right?
It's dependent on the market, but the groves, the sooner we can, there's issues that we have with the groves beyond just development.
Right, because they're not.
Watering, production,
all that stuff.
pest issues, quarantine issues. So there's a long tail that wags that dog, and sooner rather than later.
So all the groves that are being removed now are within this yellow portion, except there is some property here that is owned by, Findlay and Ramirez. So those are not being taken out now, as far as I could tell, based on my drive-by on the way in. Down here, they're being taken out. And as Conrad mentioned, there's certain protocols that, just for the sake of information, this is where the environmental impact report comes in. So before the trees can be removed, there does have to be a nesting bird survey and other types of bird surveys. If nesting birds are found, then the nests need to be protected until the birds are moved out. So there might be areas that are fenced off with kind of the orange construction fencing. And also there's biological monitors out there monitoring as the ground is disturbed, and cultural resource monitors out there. We're working with the tribes to coordinate that process in case any artifacts are turned up, even during the removal of the trees, because the removal of the trees creates quite a bit of ground disturbance, even though it's not grading per se. And the oak trees, as I mentioned, the majority of them, the 26 to 30, are in this area, except there's a little cluster right up here, which is, there's not any orange groves up in that portion right now. So this is the portion that's coming out, and the city portion is not being touched at this point.
There's been more interest than I anticipated in that oak grove. People really want to be sure those oak trees aren't going to disappear. So
Well, they're required to be maintained under your general plan. It is the only area of oak woodland, as poor as the habitat is, designated in the city's general plan on the conservation vegetation map. And I think, as we talked about, if you may recall at the last meeting, we talked about the concept for the oak woodland preserve the specific plan actually offers an opportunity to enhance that area and hopefully improve the management of the oak woodlands within there, and maybe bring it back to some level of health. Not that the trees are all that unhealthy, but it's really not the prime conditions for them, the way the soil's been compacted in the area, and just the level of activity that happens there.
Sounds like things are coming to an end for our questions. Now we need to open the public hearing. So we'll tap the hammer. Public come forward with any discussion or comments. Traditionally limited to 3 minutes each. If you do, go ahead, come forward. State your name and your address.
My name is Alexander Belousov. I live at 11810 Westminster Court in Loma Linda. I thank you for the opportunity. It seems to that in any kind of development where we're bringing 1,000 dwelling units, 2.5 people on average each, 2,500 people, was there any consideration given to emergency and risk management? Access for the emergency vehicles, extra policing, for the water features if they do go in, is there lifeguards, and what safety consideration for children, because it's a park that is gonna be implemented towards part of general development? And has there been input from the fire and the police on this new development and its structure? Like said, trails, emergency access to the trails that are not roads, and so forth. So that's my question to the Development Commission.
Quick answer, there will be a fire station right in the middle. So that was proposed as a part of this project.
In addition, when the specific plans come in, they go through our fire engineering and fire prevention division on when you see a lot more detail than you've seen that, all that comes through the process as well.
As far as the lakes, typically they're shallow enough that it's the best way to prevent drowning is to stand up. So they're, we're not looking at real deep things. So, and the trails, I don't believe we have any that are really cutting through dead areas. Part of that trail design is so we don't create blind corridors, that areas are visible and accessible for crime prevention. We work with the Sheriff's Department on some of that design as well. So all of the things you're bringing up are very valid concerns and are concerns that we're addressing as part of integrating this together.
I'll jump in, sorry. John, I don't know if you were, okay. There's some other discussions of things that are going on kind of in the background, but there was an idea of kind of a way to kind of bolster some of our public safety elements. And there's a couple of things we want to take advantage of. Ideas being thrown out there like maybe a training facility where we would get people to come in and do training and stuff like that. Because anytime we have public safety coming in and out of the city, that benefits us, right? There was some discussion with the county and the Sheriff's Department at the potentially building a building there alongside, and we have our own kind of substation or a new station here. And again, this is all just talk, but it's talk that is going on. And then if you didn't know, and for those of you guys in the public, the Highway Patrol is moving their local Highway Patrol station in here, and it's going to be right across the street at the corner of Bryn Mawr and Redlands Boulevard. And I just talked to the commander of that station the other day, happened to run into him at lunch. That station currently exists up in Muscoy, but it is moving. It will be down here. They're building that will be in within the next 2 to 3 years. He said they're just now picking the construction or awarding the architect and all that stuff. So that's really good for us because that brings in more public safety into the community that we don't necessarily have to pay for. So all of those things are being discussed, and they're all big positives. Some of that too, as we look to develop the retail space and that area down there, there's been a lot of talk about what's a good way to attract the right type of things, maybe restaurants. So if you bring in restaurants and then we have lots of cops and firemen around, I mean, it benefits us as residents. So those are the things that are being discussed.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Artist Wasdatsky, and my address is 26358 Cardigan Place. And I live in the development that's just north of Redlands Boulevard, just about where the groves, the oak trees come up there. That's the Bryn Mawr Street there that's proposed. I have several questions. If you ever come out of our development on Friday afternoon, at present, before any of this has gone in, we have to go into the suicide lane oftentimes to get out onto that Redlands Boulevard. And so when I think of, we already have the Mission School that's added traffic, we have the VA that's added traffic, then we're talking about a middle school, and then the CHP, and then the main entry coming there at Bryn Mawr. It's going to be really hard to get out of our development. We have 100 homes in there. So that's one concern I have. Another question I have is, how many of those lower and middle income units are there going to be? I understand in the printout it says 258 of low and middle, but how many are low and how many are middle? I see that there's 98 high density. Does high density mean low income? Is that equivalent? Is that what it means? Or that's not necessarily?
They're not, those two numbers are not necessarily equivalent. And the numbers you're talking about are potential units, not necessarily designated for that use. So as the development comes in and the developer, it's a negotiated thing with the city, and there's a lot of arm twisting and credits that are exchanged for activities on the site to actually end up with that unit count.
So where would those low-income units go in? Has that been determined yet?
That has not been determined, and it probably won't be until, as each piece gets developed, a portion of that will be designated as low income. Theoretically, and just because the senior product typically has more low income than other products, there'd be a fairly large number there. Multifamily, a number would be designated. What we're not looking for in that area is a low income project.
Right.
We're looking for low income units scattered throughout as part of the organic development of that process. So there's a cross section and not a concentration of low income.
Our homeowners were concerned when we saw the VA going in there, but I've been really pleased because that has really raised our level of living there rather than bring it down. It's been really well, we haven't had as much traffic as we anticipated from the VA, and we really like the trails for walking, and so I look forward to the little parking, the park area in there, and I hope that they're not coming in the very end. It looks like they're, part of it will come in at the second and then the third.
There's some fairly early triggers on that, and your traffic concern, once the VA signal is, it's there, but everything starts flowing with normal traffic, and then the other activity that, Jarb has spent the last 6 months on is that California Street widening, and our anticipation is that that'll have repercussions, all the way around the area as people are trying not to, make turns and avoid California and go down Redlands, that there'll be some more normal traffic flow in that area that should alleviate some of your concerns there too.
I will say that right now, it's so hazardous that many of us are afraid to walk over to that new trail that's along California Street, that really nice one that City of Redlands put in, because I almost got hit when I was trying to cross Redlands Boulevard because there's so many lanes that are going in and about. So, that's another thought, the safety of people getting to these trails.
Well, starting this coming Monday, we will close off California Street south of Redlands Boulevard and straighten out that intersection.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see that's happening. And my one last question is about the Heritage Park. What does that mean? What is a heritage? What is going to go in there?
The Heritage Park is that narrow, that blue strip there on the left-hand side. Currently, we have 3 historic houses that have been relocated there. 2 of them have been rehabbed and refurbished, not remodeled, for active use. There will be at least one other and possibly two other houses moved on that site. And then conceptually will be a heritage grove of orange trees and some demonstration projects and gardens as kind of historic monument and remnant of the original orange production here in the area. So it's kind of an interpretive, not necessarily an active use playground park, but more of an interpretive and educational area.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion between we have different state mandates for affordable housing, and one is a regional housing needs assessment that basically tells us we have to put in high-density housing. It doesn't have to be low-income housing, and that's what you're seeing mostly here. And then there's a 10% kind of a requirement to have 10%. And remember, we're 88 units ahead before we even start this. And there are just over 1,000 units in this entire area. So it would only require about 100 houses, and we're 88 ahead somewhere else. So there's not going to be a whole lot of affordable housing in this project. Affordable housing meaning subsidized housing. That's what it really means. Okay, any other? Here we go.
Thank you, Dick Wiley, here in Loma Linda. I would like to first thank Melanie and Karen. This has been a long process. They came to Historic Commission and talked to us, got our ideas. We had the workshop. Ideas went all over, and we narrowed it down, or they narrowed it down. Then they brought it to city staff. City staff's been working on this. This has come a long ways. And anybody that's been around here for a while, I think when this is done, they will really appreciate what this has done for that area. And hopefully it'll ultimately come out with something that we'll all go over and say, nice job. With the developers, the builders, and this planning process all together. So, thanks for the hard work and a great job.
Any other comments from the public? Come forward.
Good evening. My name is Joel Smith. I represent, my address is 10799 California Street. According to that map, I'm across the way from PA 9. And we've noticed the changes that have been going on, but we didn't know what was going on until you guys put a big sign on our property stating that California is going to be widened. So just to let you know, no communication about your project. I know that we're in Redlands, but we're still affected by your project. So I had to get online to your website to download your master plan and a few other things. And one of my biggest concerns, and I noticed this almost immediately, when the orange groves disappeared, the temperature around our property has increased, almost maybe 5 to 10 degrees hotter. And so I've reviewed the EIR report online, and it mentions nothing about, unless I missed it, it mentions nothing about the permanent heat gain that the residents are going to get on California Street as well as on Mission. So we have an energy cost that's now gone up. Now I understand that some trees will come back, but not all the trees. So I think that needs to be in that report, stating that we now have a permanent energy increase, and what's going to happen to people who live along there. I'm going to have to pay an extra $100 to keep my air conditioner on. I don't use that much water as it is, but still, the energy cost. We live in a house that's 108 years old, maybe a little less, but it's over 100 years old, and it requires constant maintenance, and that energy is going to be a problem if we have to add that extra money to that. So I was curious, is there any plan to compensate the people who are on California as well as Mission? That's one question. And then the widening of California, the big sign that you guys have there, it says that according to this, that you'll be expanding on either side roughly 10 to 11 feet on either side. That gets really close to our boundaries. And I was curious, did you change our right-of-way or our easement to accommodate this new change? And then this is only half the road. You're saying a 4-lane highway from a 2-lane. So that means you eventually are going to be wiping out the neighbors on California, on the east side of California. So the church, the SDA church that's on California, as well as the apartments that are more to the south, they've already made that accommodation, but will you be wiping us out anytime soon so that we can prepare? Those are my two questions.
With regard to California's widening project, right now, as part of what we're doing, we widen about approximately 400 feet south of Redlands Boulevard. So we are still within the public street right-of-way and the county flood control. There's a triangle piece of property between Park Avenue and Redlands Boulevard that we tried to acquire the property, but the property owner asked for too much money for it, so we're just gonna wait. And yes, eventually the property will, the city have to widen the street further south all the way to Barton Road, but we're not gonna do anything for right now until you decide to sell the property and want to develop the property. Then the city will ask the property owner or potential buyer or builders to dedicate the right-of-way to the city for the street improvement.
I understand that. If you follow the line off of the SDA church as well as the apartments to the south, you follow that line up to California Street.
Yes.
It takes out at least 3 of the homes. That line goes through my mother-in-law's living room, also our neighbor's living room, and the new, or not new addition, but the house that's on the very corner, I think, of Park and Barton. So you would have to acquire the entire property.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just wondering.
The property owner at the southeast corner of California Park did came in and talk to me.
Okay.
But right now, we don't have any plan until there's a traffic demand that say the city, you need to widen California Street to the east, and then the city will go and purchase the right-of-way.
So I was gonna say, I think it maybe is just a little confusing, where there's no plans to widen California at this point. It's just widening the or correcting the intersection. And then the widening all occurs as the development happens up and down California, so.
So when PA 9, 10, and 11 become developed at a particular point, then it'll affect my side of the street?
They develop on their side.
On their side?
Yeah.
And then in the event that, say, not to say this will happen, but my house burns down, you will probably impose, well, you can't put the house in the same spot, you have to put it on another portion of our property, right? Something like that?
However that would look, that would be down the road, but
Okay.
there's no city plans to widen anything on the east side.
Okay.
We're just fixing the intersection at this point.
So the, now the EIR report about the heat gain, who do I talk to about that? I mean, I want more information on that, basically. So is that something that they need to emphasize on, or is something that you guys do?
I don't know that we addressed heat is not part of the environmental criteria, and part of what's happening with the groves in that area. Yes, you're going down to bare dirt. Once construction happens and the area gets filled back in, then there'll be yards with grass and trees and those type of heat mitigators that organically happen as part of residential development. And even commercial development requires a fairly large number of trees in the parking lots and around structures. But there will be, yes, an interim phase where there aren't those trees to absorb that, so there will be added heat from that.
I understand that, but also with the roads that you plan to put in, the sidewalks, the building materials for the roof, there's all going to be some kind of stone or concrete base. Then you're going to have the restaurants that you propose, they'll be kicking out all that extra heat. from their ovens and so forth, and then you got the cars that will be driving through that neighborhood also pushing out that heat. That's the heat gain that's going to affect everybody around us. I mean, Loma Linda needs this. It's been around here for 20 some odd years. It's about time that this gets done, but that's the other side effect or the problem with it.
There will be heat. We will do what we can to mitigate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I see people shifting in their seats, but not to get up.
You know, I was pretty
They're
sure
just getting
Kurt,
tired.
I was pretty sure Kurt wanted to come up.
Yeah, he shuffled a bit in his seat, but I didn't. Okay, the former mayor.
Good evening, Milford Harrison, 11795 Randolph Court. I want to compliment the staff, the city, on the plans. That piece of blue property there, I negotiated and purchased when I was on the council. And I'm glad to see that things are finally happening on that. We've had a number of propositions and proposals over the years. I want to say that I'm really happy that you're considering a lake, and I love roundabouts. And overall, I think it's going to be a great addition to our city. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Going, gone. Okay, the public hearing is closed. I think now we need to let the planning commission chew it over for a while.
Well, we'll see how much chewing is going to go on here, Nesty. Rich, what's the requirement for the commission to do this, take action? Can we take action on all 6, items and recommend moving them in a positive way to the council? Do we do them one at a time? What's the?
I think if you're prepared to take action without any further modifications or recommendations, you may do so by adopting from staff report page 1 and 2. There are the 6 recommended actions from staff that the Planning Commission in turn would recommend to the City Council. And
Those were the 6 I was referring to.
yes, and you could do them as one action by at least summarizing what they are with some
If I recall,
A is first.
Chairman Nichols wanted to see some cleanup revisions with regard to the specific areas. Would that be covered under 6? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I understood.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, if the commissioners, I'm looking at the 6 that we looked up on the screen, and then I see A, B, C, D, and E on the actual agenda. Are those corresponding together?
yes.
Except for 6, the cleanup. So.
And number
Item
6
F.
is basically to direct staff to review and revise as appropriate to provide the non-substantive implementation language and to ensure consistency with the overall direction and intent of the Planning Commission and City Council as expressed this evening. And they would accomplish that subject to the approval of the Community Development Director.
Yeah, unless the commission believes that deliberation on individual items will further enlighten the council as they move forward, we could entertain a motion for items A through E and then add item F for cleanup.
Sure. In that case, I would want to, let's see, I would move.
I would go 1 through 6
Yes.
on page 1 and 2.
Let's see, I would move, let's see. In that case, we're moving to recommend items 1 through 6. Oh, do I have to
There we go.
call out all those individual things? All right. Y, B, C, D, E. Slow. 5. Okay. So we are recommending to move to approve to the city council. Let's see, I'm just going to read off the staff report recommendation. To certify environmental impact report for special planning area D, to approve general plan amendment P18-048, to approve specific plan zone map amendment number P18-049, to approve specific plan number P17-193, and to approve zone change map amendment number P18-050, along with direction to the city staff regarding final revisions, follow-up task of administration, cleanup, etc. Does that work?
Yes, and that would include all of the various findings, statement of overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring reporting program, and so forth, as set forth in the recommendation.
Then I would add those.
Yes. All right, Jay, it's up to you to second, buddy. Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. There you go, council. Got our full support.
So your meetings are pretty short, huh, compared to ours? Yeah.
Never go past 9:30.
Yeah. Okay, now I heard during the presentation that we're supposed to approve the EIR first. So do we have to do it break it up that way to make it obvious we did the EIR first, or?
If you're more comfortable doing that, I think when you take them as all one action, the intent is that the environmental goes first and is a precondition to all the others.
Okay, then we'll do it the quick way, as long as that understanding is there. So is there a motion from the council? We have items A through E.
I will make the motion to move items A through E.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Do we have to go into any more detail in the motion, or is that enough?
Well, I think it's good to summarize what the motion is and include the findings and statement of overriding considerations and so forth by reference as set forth in the staff recommendation on page 1 and 2 of the staff report, and specifying in particular the environmental impact findings, the general plan amendment, specific plan zone map amendment, specific plan, and zone change map amendment as identified in the staff report and as referenced by the Planning Commission a moment ago.
I will amend my motion to what he said.
I have a question on this, because on looking at the city council agenda, items D and E, this is a first reading with a second reading scheduled for June 26th, but that's not the case with A, B, C.
Correct.
So we would handle them separately, or can we combine them all? Because my impression
C
is...
also has it.
Yes, that is why if you look
C,
at...
yeah, C as well.
If you look at page 1 of the staff recommendation and the staff report, it does show the specific council bills, which are ordinances, and those are by introduction on first reading tonight, and you're setting the second reading for June 26th.
But that's not the case on the first, on A and B.
The resolutions do not require two hearings.
So our motion should be to approve A and B, the council bills by number, but we withhold any action until June 26th is how I'm reading this.
We still have to approve the first reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why it's perhaps a little simpler to flip to the staff report, because it does include the language on introduction of the ordinances and setting the second reading. But resolutions only require one meeting to approve. The ordinance requires that it be introduced and then adopted at least 5 days
But it is
afterwards.
appropriate to pass the resolutions at the same time we pass the other three.
Yes.
Okay.
So do I need to read that recommendation, or?
Well,
Barbara, we're good?
they were identified by resolution number and ordinance number previously, and I think we've summarized those in the motion, and I think Barbara has the staff report with those listed specifically. If there's any question or confusion, we could go back and read those again specifically, but
Okay,
if
but we
Barbara-
clearly are having a second meeting in June.
Yes.
Yeah.
June 26th would be second reading.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Just,
your comments are appreciated.
Real quick before we do the final vote, I just want to make a comment that, you know, this has been of intense interest and concern for a lot of people in town. This is the biggest thing we've done in a while, and you know, I'd like to say everybody here on the council and the planning commission, I believe we all come from the same place. We care deeply about the community. We want the community to stay, for the most part, what it is. But you know, we are faced with some realities, and that is that we can't stop some progress, and we'd like to see it shaped and fashioned in a way that represents our values here. So I really want to commend also the staff that has done a great job putting this together. It is all of our belief that we are on the right page, we're doing the right thing here. So let future folks judge us appropriately, but with that, I'll finalize the motion and we'll move it.
And I imagine the second is covering the new version of your motion.
You reaffirm the second there, Ron.
You're seconding it as he amended his motion. Okay.
And
So
you know
is that enough?
I know everybody's going to speed it up, but in having gone through this about, 10 years ago, I think it's really good that we follow the rules. So I know you made a motion a second, but just for the sake of the record, I'm actually going to read specifically what we're all voting on, so there's no confusion. Because a lot of these things can be brought up on technicalities based on the fact that we've had almost 10 minutes of confusion about what we're exactly approving. So I know you made a motion to approve items A through E, and I'm just going to read them. Council Bill R 2018-26, certifying the environmental impact report for the Groves at Loma Linda Specific Plan and Phase 3 Concept Area Project, adopting the CEQA findings, Statement of Overriding Considerations, and Mitigations Monitoring Reporting Program. It also includes item number B, which is Council Bill R-2018-27, adopting General Plan Amendment to establish specific planning area D, Phase 3 concept, and establish a specific plan designation for approximately 300 acres comprising of special planning area D based on findings and sequent review. Item number C, Council Bill 02018-03, first reading and set the second reading for June the 26th, 2018, amending the East Valley Corridor Specific Plan boundary and current zone map zone change amendment to change the zone for the same area from EVC Special Development to Planned Community and from EVC Public Institutional to Institutional Healthcare. In addition, approving zone map zone change amendment to change the zone for approximately 27.535 acres referred to as RUSD Future Middle School from single-family residential R-1 to institutional healthcare. And then D, Council Bill O201804, first reading and set the second reading for June 26, 2018, amending the official zoning map and zoning code of the City of Loma Linda to approve the Groves at Loma Linda Specific Plan and approve a zone map amendment to establish approximately 300 acres consistent with the boundary of Special Planning Area D as the Groves at Loma Linda Specific Plan area. And then E, Council Bill O201805, first reading and set the second reading for June 26, 2018, amending the previous zone map amendment changes number 15087, an overlay to integrate the master plan as part of the Groves of Loma Linda Specific Plan and amending certain aspects of the Citrus Trails Master Plan to become consistent with and direct its future implementations through the Groves of Loma Linda Specific Plan. And also included, I think, you mentioned item number 6, which is providing direction to staff regarding final revisions to the Groves at Loma Linda specific plan, follow-up tasks related to the administration and implementation and financing of development under a specific plan, and other related items as deemed appropriate. Good, just make sure that everybody's clear on what we're about to approve.
Does that reading of every word satisfy Councilman Leonard? And literally, yes. Okay, so do we have enough? I think that's enough. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no? That's unanimous. We have approval of everything under item 1 on the agenda. And we'll see everybody who wants to discuss this further on June 26th. Item number 2 is a public hearing for a CUP application. Please enlighten us on this new hotel. And I believe the Planning Commission, if you choose, are you done? Yes. Thank you for your service.
For the Planning Commission, this is deja vu all over again, right? This conditional use permit, number 17-150, for the Candlewood Suites Hotel off of Richardson and back behind Redlands Boulevard. Request to construct an 89-room, 4-story hotel, approximately 1.15 acres of a 2.4-acre site. The hotel is being constructed on the southerly portion of the site. And we'll see it when we get to the site map, kind of aggregated in the hotels into one piece. The aerial's a little bit dated. Up behind there now is the town place. The site is currently vacant. Its general plan is commercial, and it's in that notorious East Valley Corridor specific plan as general commercial zone. So it is consistent with the use and the zoning for the area. The neighboring properties are all either current commercial use or vacant. All of them are zone general commercial, so that it is consistent with the adjacent properties and conforming with the neighborhood as it stands. The site, 89 rooms, 98 parking spaces. You can see the existing Holiday Inn Express, the town place, the truck repair. This is Richardson. Redlands is out here on the front, and the freeway is back here for a frame of reference. We're looking at it with east being up. And then the site directly up against Richardson by the city well site is still a vacant site. Part of the thing that's really interesting and is finally coming together with the site is that each of the properties is kind of unique property. Each of them has certain features that on a standalone cater to a specific client set and a different market segment, but by placing all three of these together, it really provides a coherent hotel area, and it allows a shared use of resources and amenities between all the properties, which really creates almost if I say a resort feel or like going to a resort, it's really stretching it, but a feel that you're not, if you're at one product, you have the activity and the ability to get the services that the other products provide. A destination, there you go. I wouldn't even give it, that's even a stretch. I mean, it's Loma Linda, okay, but he really has worked hard to share the amenities, and this is kind of the piece that pulls all of those together. So this is an all-suite product, full-size kitchen with appliances, all full-sized. So what we typically call a kitchenette product. There's a fitness center, a laundry room, Wi-Fi. This product is designed more for the longer-term, long-stay occupant. There will be a market inside for food and groceries, barbecue pit and fire pit area. Once again, this is long-term, month-long people staying, so it almost has a feel like a small apartment type feel rather than the typical like Holiday Inn Express that's a very transient population. And then the guests will, to bring all those amenities together, have access to the pool and spa at the Holiday Inn Express and the facilities at the Town Place, the kitchen and the bar over at Town Place. So you kind of get a feel for the amenities that are coming together between the different areas, and conversely, people from Town Place and Holiday Inn Express will be able to use the barbecue area and those longer stay amenities as well. Landscape plan is fairly reflective of what is already there. There's some cypress trees and kind of fill up against the building, trying to give a little bit of shading and a little bit of softening to the structure. The plants, once again, are very consistent with what's at the Town Place and the Holiday Inn Express, giving it a feel of an integrated property. We can kind of see the palm trees and what's up against the buildings. We're going to see the elevations, and elevations are deceptive because you're looking at it straight on, but there really is a great deal of relief in the building, so you're not looking at a solid blank wall. There's a lot of ins and outs. There's some nice window treatments. They've done some stonework on the bottom. There's some use of color to break up the big massing and the scale, to kind of make the building feel a little smaller, a little more comfortable. And once again, all of these are components that tie back into the existing buildings. Like I said, it's kind of hard to see on a straight head-on, but each one of these is, there's a depth change to the building as on each one of these panels, so that there's, they've really broken it up very well. And then the kind of the end elevations. For CEQA, it complies with Measure V. There are some mitigation measures required as far as traffic and fair share basis of work done on Richardson Street and the boundary and adjacent intersections. And then all the impacts are reviewed as part of the study have been mitigated at less than significant level for cultural hydrology, noise, soils, traffic, and greenhouse. It applies with the general, complies with the general plan in East Valley Corridor specific zone. It's compatible with existing uses. It does provide a needed tax revenue. And then the CEQA findings are in support of the project. So staff is, and Planning Commission recommends adoption of the mitigated negative declaration, adoption of the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and approval of CUP 17150. Thank you. And I'll put which picture is probably best for discussion? Probably that one.
Any questions of staff?
When I was reviewing the staff report this afternoon, I didn't see anything in terms of a timetable on this. What are we projecting in terms of starting the project, and is there a projected completion date, or?
As quickly as possible. And actually, the owner is here. I'm surprised he doesn't have a hammer in his hand already. And he's done the other two projects. He does not goof around. Technically, the property is still owned by the city, so we will be closing that deal with them shortly. I believe we approved the sale about a year ago, and we've just left it in limbo until he finished the Town Place here and was able to secure the financing, so he's not building two hotels at once. But Mr. Patel can probably speak to details, but yeah, he doesn't goof around when it comes to getting these things done.
If we own the property, why don't we build the hotel?
I think that's a great idea. We'll just let him run it for us, right?
How about a land lease?
There you go.
With a 25%, 25-year, then we own it. Yeah.
So this is a current project. This isn't.
This is a very current project. And the reason the real estate deal has sat is so that he could finish the one project and go on to the next one. And from the very beginning, this has been a very, an integrated operation between the three entities. to the point that there are reciprocal parking agreements between them and reciprocal site use agreements between the three
But
entities.
it'll be the same owner, correct, for all three?
It is the same owner. It's on 3 separate parcels, nominally 3 separate corporate structures. But once again, there are reciprocal agreements between the properties, so that should Mr. Patel decide to divest himself of this, that those reciprocal pieces are still in place for them.
Good, good. Appreciate the confidence you have in our city. You've are investing a lot here. Thank you.
He has mostly confidence in the marketplace that's really hot. Any other questions of staff? Because I need to open the public hearing. Okay, public hearing is open. Come forward. Any comments?
My name is Alexander Belousov. I still live in 11810 Westminster Court. And it's my first time at the council meeting after the election. Congratulations, by the way. I looked up the candidates and I looked up, what the business is in the city and decided to come. So my question about this project is, I happen to drive on Richardson to work, down to San Bernardino and back from work up to, and the road is not in a great condition. There's a big old, drainage ditch in the middle that you have to slow down to 5 miles an hour, and it's a 2-lane road, and now there's hotel traffic on it. So is there plans to maybe upgrade that road at least up to the freeway, or maybe even past that? And there's another. No, that's it. I think that's it. So is there a plan to upgrade the road? Because it's really vital to my standard of living as well.
The quick answer is yes. The San Bernardino Associate Government, or it used to be called SAMBAG, has been working on widening the I-10 freeway from the county line all the way to the city of Redlands. As part of that, they had to pretty much remove and replace Richardson overpass, and so that is part of the plan. I think the board member just approved the design built for the portion from the county line to the I-15 freeway.
Yeah.
So that is in the work. But the section from the 15 to Redlands, they don't have that plan yet. So
Yeah,
so it's in the work.
it'll be a long time coming because the price is going up very rapidly, and the project may run out of any kind of revenue projections to cover the costs by the time it gets all the way over here. But I think his concern is the actual road quality between the hotel and Redlands Boulevard.
I think his concern is that dip.
Yeah, there's a dip.
That's right.
Yeah, there's not much warning for
Kyle,
it.
can you bring that site map back, please?
I don't know because I'm sure that has to do with drainage,
So
and you
if
probably
you-
have to run something underneath it.
If you look at that, what he has designated as vacant pad for future development, when that piece becomes developed, that piece on the top there along Richardson, then that would be responsible for half of the street improvement.
Okay.
So typically when something happens against the street, that half of the street gets the improvement. And right now there is not anything slated to happen, but with that many hotels, somebody is going to have to find a place to eat, and Mr. Patel just can't help himself. He has to build hotels.
That'd be a perfect place for fast food. I can even
when
stop and wait from work on that. So.
When that develops, then that piece of Richardson will be
It's
cleaned
something
up.
about Lucille's right there.
And then the same thing to the property to the east, it's all vacant lot, the old drive-in theaters. When that developed, that property owner have to widen that portion of Richardson also.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Just to, not to belabor that, but just to follow up that dip like that, yeah, it is for drainage, right? So in order to fix that, you'd have to run drainage underneath the roadway. So it's not an easy fix.
It slows traffic down.
Well, because to fix it, I can fix that.
Well, it slows traffic to a stop because your oil pan is leaking. So any other comments from the public?
Gotta fix your shock
Clarification question. Jarb, you said they're gonna redo that whole bridge when they actually widen the freeway? That's a huge project.
Well, that's why the project is billions of dollars.
Wow. So they would actually make that like what? Do what to it? Add an extra lane? Or what exactly would they have to do to the bridge?
They would add a lane in each direction.
Would they?
Of the Richardson
I don't know if they have to add a lane.
No,
I think it
I
has to do
know.
with-
I understand the freeway. I'm talking about the
Richardson
bridge.
is still 2 lanes.
I know, but why do they have to replace the bridge?
Because
of
the
span.
freeway under it doesn't fit.
The span, yeah.
That's a very expensive.
Well, that's just one of many. That's one of many. That's why it's so expensive to put in extra lanes. And that's why also they feel the obligation to jam the traffic as much as they can in order to drive people into the toll lanes to pay for the improvements. So one of my complaints
I don't
in
agree
general.
with that theory, by the way. I don't agree with that theory at all.
Well, thank you for your wrong opinion, but the problem with government owning a toll road that depends on traffic jams is it encourages them to make the policies so that the traffic jams are retained. So toll roads don't get rid of traffic, they only toll traffic. So, but that's my opinion. And your opinion is, your opinion doesn't have a vote at
toll, and I
Sandbag.
go faster than those who want to stay in traffic. So to me, the toll roads work pretty dang good. I go faster when I use them.
Good for you, you don't have a vote at Sandbag.
Well, but I'm just saying, toll roads are not as bad as you might think.
I'm a little puzzled that they're widening the freeway from where to
The county line.
They're widening the freeway for toll lanes, 2 toll lanes, all the way from the LA County line to the I-10-215 interchange eventually, and then 1 toll lane from the I-215-10 interchange all the way to Ford Street in Redlands. One lane on each side, not 2 lanes. There's 2 lanes west of the 215 for the
15.
toll lane.
It's 15.
No, the original, the first phase is to the 15. The next phase is from the 15 to the 215, and that's also 2 lanes each direction. And then from the 215 to Ford Street is 1 lane each direction. And so they have to widen the hole under Richardson by 1 lane on each side to make it fit.
I understand it when you get down towards the LA County border, but up this direction, the traffic all boogers up at the 10-15 interchange now, and I don't see how that's going to change anything if it's not widened beyond the 15. The only time I see a lot of traffic through Colton is when the traffic backs up at the interchange in Loma Linda.
Yeah.
And it'll just make that worse now, potentially.
Well, you understand my comment. My comment was that if the traffic does not continue, no one will use the toll lanes.
Yeah.
No one will pay a toll if there's no traffic. So when government puts in a toll lane,
No, I understand that.
they want traffic. So they start putting in accessory rules to the toll lane that encourage the traffic jams to develop earlier and to last longer. But that's my complaint about toll lanes. But I have solutions for it if you want to hear it. But not now.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
are these toll lanes leading to the Candlewood Suites Hotel?
directly.
I'm wondering why we're spending time talking about this when we have this item on the agenda. Okay, that's fine. You'll have a lot of traffic coming to your hotel, so do we need a motion?
I'll move it.
No, wait, I haven't finished the
I'll second
public,
it.
I haven't
We're in
finished the
public
public hearing yet. Is the public done? Okay, public hearing is done.
I'll move it.
Now you can make your motion.
I think I'll second, Mr. Duper's motion.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second to approve the recommendations in the staff report. Any further comment? Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did everybody vote? Yeah. Okay. Any noes? I didn't hear any noes. That's unanimous. Congratulations. You want to read it all? So my take is that you have an approval. Congratulations. Item number 3 is a public hearing on landscape maintenance.
Again, this is, we present this at the May 8th City Council meeting to initiate the engineering report for the landscape assessment district and request the City Council approve the report and open public hearing.
Okay, any questions for the staff? Hearing no questions.
Is this the one across from Surgical Hospital, is that?
That's number 5.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'll open the public hearing. Come forward if you have any comments on this landscape maintenance district assessment. No comments, close the public hearing. What's your pleasure?
I'll move it.
Council Bill R2018-18.
I will second Council Bill R-20.
We're on 17, not 18.
Dash 17.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to approve the council bill. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That's a unanimous approval. Item number 4, public hearing on Council Bill R-2018-18 for a streetlight benefit assessment district.
Are we still in the process of converting our old street lights to the new ones?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Every time we replace a light bulb, we replace with the
LED.
What's our percentage? Yeah, no.
And asking permission from Councilman Lenart to digress, but are you going to replace the runover street light at Sierra Vista on Barton? There's no street light at Sierra Vista on Barton, and it's a very dark intersection at this point. It's unrelated, but it's a street
Somebody
light.
hit it?
Somebody ran over it, and it has not been replaced. Where my in-laws' house is. So I got that question.
The guardrail there needs attention
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. It's a private road off the side of Barton as it curves up into town. It's a 4-lane road. Well, Sierra Vista's 2 lanes, yeah. Okay, so now I need to open the public hearing for this one. Come forward, all ye who have a comment. All the people are sitting tight, so we'll close the public hearing. And what's the motion?
Move Council Bill R-2018-18.
Okay, there's a motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed say no. It's approved unanimously. Item number 5, public hearing, Council Bill R-2018-25, approving an annexation to a landscape maintenance district. And I think we need to change the name of the facility because they dumped the heart part of their name.
We all knew
recently.
where they were talking about.
It's now called the Loma University Surgical Hospital. It's purely lush.
But their landscaping is terrible.
Yes, and does this include the median that
Yes,
was
this is the
so
median.
messed up
Yes.
It is the
on
median.
Barton?
This is only the
That's what it
median.
is, basically
It
just
is the median.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll be able to get a crew out there?
Yes, sir.
'Cause, I mean, that's one of the.
So we can just charge them and do it.
thoroughfares.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And too bad that Curtis just left, but Curtis Sharp was here earlier, but he
He
left.
got tired. Is there money involved with this, I assume?
Oh, yes, they have to pay the assessment as part of the property tax.
Okay, good.
Okay, so any other questions of staff? After the public hearing is open. Come forward, all 4 of you. No takers. Okay. Close the public hearing.
Move Council Bill R-2018-25.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. And any further discussion?
We have.
Oh, we have a vote?
No, we have ballots from the.
We have to open the ballots
have
and
to-
see if the one
there's-
property owner agrees.
There's two parcels, so there's two ballots.
Oh, okay.
And for parcel number 0292-164-06, the vote is no, they're opposed to the assessment.
Uh-oh.
Who's the owner?
Who is that?
Loma Linda University Medical Center.
Yeah, exactly.
And the second parcel is 0292-164-05, and they are, vote no, they are opposed to the assessment.
Both of them own
Both of them are opposed to the assessment.
So they want to weed it themselves.
Wow. How does that impact?
This has never happened to us before.
So tell us, does that mean we cannot pass?
They don't want to weed it, is the problem.
They're not.
They're not here to explain it.
I know, but they voted and voted against.
So that nullifies anything we do.
Correct. So
Right.
now they have to still maintain the median themselves.
Okay, so
Which
item
meeting are we
five,
talking
item
about?
5 is not approved.
This one?
Yes.
So they voted against it?
And they're the one who came to us.
Well, that's why I'm so surprised. But then we need to have the enforcement officer out there tomorrow and every week after that until it gets cleaned up. Because it is awful. I mean, they've got weeds 2-3 feet high.
Are both property owners the institution?
Both property owners, the medical center, there's two parcels. That's why there's two votes, one for each parcel.
Does one part of the institution cast the vote and another wing of the
Well, I was gonna say,
institution?
which one of them came and asked us to do this? Because somebody didn't get the message. Whoever got the mail, just check no.
Was this Gerhard, did he say yes or no?
He doesn't want to maintain it, that's why.
So Gerhard said yes, and whoever voted said no.
It's whoever answered the mail.
The finance
Probably
department.
clerk in the
Probably
mailroom.
the treasurer or. It is money related.
I'm assuming it was from their money.
So
people.
finance, as
money, it's
usual,
dollars.
if finance doesn't say yes, nothing works.
Now,
And I'll tell you here's my commentary on that. In the English language, in England, they came up with a word called comptroller, the comptroller of the currency. And you know how the British are, they turn Worcestershire into Worcestershire, and they turn comptroller into controller, and it went to their heads. So the finance people think they're in control when they're in comptrol. So there you have it.
Just out of interest of fairness, it would be interesting to find out exactly what the amount would be of the assessment district, because that might help us understand. Maybe it's cheaper for them to do it rather than.
I'm sure,
it is. I
I'm
think
sure,
it is
but they
cheaper,
don't
they
do
just
it.
don't.
Well, they already pay Gerhard to do it.
So, if I understand how this works, for a private citizen on their own property, we give them warnings and cite them, but then if they don't clean it up, particularly for fire prevention, if they don't clean it up, then we clean it up and send them a bill, right?
Or attached to their
So,
property tax.
is there any problem with us using that same process for this median? Because it has looked bad for years.
I think that's only in fire, that's a safety element.
And I recognize that, I'm just asking the
Yeah,
question.
no, I got you.
For code enforcement, we would have to warn them, cite them repeatedly, and then determine that it's a public nuisance, have a public nuisance hearing. We went through that with Mr. Levinsky a couple of years ago. And then the council would have to uphold the nuisance complaint, and then we could go ahead and abate it.
So let's start the process, because this is not a new issue, and it's not episodic. Even after they clean it up, the weeds are lower, but it still looks weedy. So, I mean, it's a main thoroughfare entering the city, and so I think this requires some special attention.
Is there any way, can we table this until they got their organizational issues straightened out, or no?
Well, we can always bring it back if they re-request it. Yeah.
We can't just confiscate it.
When the property initially develops and they choose not to go in the landscape district and to maintain it themselves, is there any language or understanding that if they don't do it, then we can assign the landscape district? Does that exist, or?
Yeah, we can't impose the landscape maintenance district without the property owner's consent. A majority protest stops the annexation. So that's where we are.
The dollar amounts for one parcel, it is an annual assessment of $3,686.12, and the second one is $3,406.02.
Well, I would have voted no too.
Every
My
penny
goodness, that's
counts.
expensive.
$7,000 annually.
That's a lot of money for pulling a few weeds. I think they would go out and pull them. So let's see, we'll see.
But organization that size, $3,000 is decimal dust.
True, but when you're in a cash flow crunch,
Yeah.
every dollar counts. Pretty soon it adds up. Okay, so item number
What
5
is the
is not
follow-up?
approved.
What is the follow-up on this? Who's going to contact them? Okay. Okay.
He probably thinks it passed.
Okay, the consent calendar looks exciting. There's a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Is there any further discussion? Any pulled items? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. It's approved unanimously. Item number 13. There's some vacancies.
There are. At this time, the item is strictly informational. The notice and summary of each of the committees, commissions, and boards having members' terms expiring have been posted at the city's 3 required posting places out here on the board, the library, and the post office, as well as on the homepage of our website, and it's also advertised out here on the message board out on the corner. Those with terms expiring have been contacted to determine their continued interest and availability to serve. The applications for anybody else who's interested in applying are available on our website, and we will be bringing it back to the council July 10 for final report and action.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Okay, then any reports of councilmen?
Just we have the League of Cities thing coming up here, where we're going to have the Hope team talk about the homeless issues, so I think that'd be interesting if you guys can make it, and it's at the Town Place Suites here in town.
Is this...
Much to the chagrin of all the other member cities who seem to think that nobody would ever want to come to Loma Linda for a meeting. Yeah.
But it's such a nice meeting room.
It is beautiful.
The other event is not there. We're having to go to San Bernardino for the state of the...
No, I think he misspoke. I think it is there. Yeah. Yeah, it is there.
You meant to
the
say
town place, yeah.
Redlands Boulevard, not Waterman.
Yeah, I think he misspoke, yeah.
Yeah.
How long before somebody, well, here's what happened. One of my constituents signed up for the auto pay of the water and sewer trash, got a notice that said you were signed up for auto pay, and then woke up the next 3 days later and his water was turned off because he didn't pay, even though he has a notice that said he auto paid. Is there some sort of time period before you shut people's water off?
They should get a door hanger the night before. It's a 24-hour notice, but that sounds like it might have been a wrong address.
But he had something that says you've successfully signed up for auto pay. So he
From
thought
the
it was
bank,
done.
though? You're talking about from his bank or from here?
From here, I think. Maybe I misunderstood him.
Yeah, because I do auto pay from the bank, but you know, the bank actually sends a check. There's
Right.
no like,
But do you do auto pay? Can you set up here and have it automatically?
Yes, you can.
I got the idea that that's what he did. I
Oh.
think
Yes.
it came from the city, a notice, or he saw it somewhere from the city that said you were signed up for auto pay, so he didn't worry about it, and then his water was turned off.
Correct.
We sent out 3 notices before we turn off.
Well,
He may not have
on
told
the-
me that.
On the auto pay, it's different, and there would only be other circumstances that we would go back and then turn it off if, for some reason, the payment was returned to us, or if it was a mistake on the address that the guys went to.
But there still should be a notice.
Oh, yes. Yes, we post
He
a
said he never
24
got
hour
any
by
notice or
law.
anything,
We are,
it's just water didn't work.
Was he using more than the 55 gallons a day?
He probably took a shower and did laundry on the same day, and Governor
See?
Brown turned it off.
There you go.
Anyway, just look into it.
yeah, if he calls us, we can, the
Okay.
lady should be able to, and if it was an error on our part, we'll take care of it right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that diversion and excellent use of our time. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Any reports of officers? Okay, then, with great respect and honor, we adjourn in honor of Doug Welliber, our first mayor, who served from 1970 to 1974. He passed away in May, and we honor him by adjourning today. And our next meeting will be on Tuesday, June 26th.
I wanted just to kind of share a few words. Doug Williber was a very great inspiration to many of us. Some of you may have known him more than us, but I got to know him since I was in high school, and his kids went to Loma Academy, and we went to his house many, many times for Bible study. He was one of the Sabbath school teachers for many, many years at University Church, and he basically started what turned out to be Crosswalk, which is now Relive. So as a result of him, now we have a major church that actually sprung up, and he was one of the first people that brought in a lot of young people and university students who eventually outgrew its location and moved to its own church. So that's something to be said about him. But he was also an amazing person. He was a great lawyer. He was a good friend, and his mom's still living here in Loma Linda. She's 103, and he's developed some great roots in the community, and many, many people knew him. And I got to attend his services this last Saturday, and the church was packed. So he definitely impacted many, many people in this community, and he will be greatly missed.
Good comments. I knew Doug fairly well. It was sporadic, but I knew him fairly well, and he was very solid. And Milford, I know him also, so it's a real loss. I didn't even know he was ill.
Yeah, he was quite secretive about his suffering, so, yeah, he suffered in silence.
He was also the youngest mayor the city's ever had.
Yeah, he was 25 or 26.
Interesting is they showed a picture. He sat next to President Nixon when they did the red ribbon cutting ceremony for the new VA back in 1972 or 73, I think.
Yes, okay, now we'll move to the Housing Authority. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Any public comment on any non-agenda items, which includes only the demands register in the minutes? No public comment. What's your pleasure on the consent calendar? Okay, there's a motion, two motions, and I'll take one of them as a second. Any further discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, it's approved. Any member reports? Hearing none. Any officers' reports? Hearing none, we're adjourned. The next agenda is the successor agency. Any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Any comment from the public on any non-agenda items? Seeing none. Consent calendar.
I'll move it. I have a quick question. When are they moving that to the county-wide successor agency?
July 1.
July 1st. So this may be the last meeting we have as a successor agency?
We always have to do it. For the next meeting, we'll do it one more time.
The successor agency, we will continue to be a successor agency. The oversight board gets transferred to the.
I see.
We
Okay.
still have the administrative side of the.
I see.
the
Okay.
Successor agency.
Okay. So how long will that go? Forever?
The successor agency, probably until we do our last and final ROPS that we submit, but that hasn't been the recommendation for, from legal counsel until we're fully paid off on our loans, and then it's just.
Oh, so it's gonna be forever, okay. Too bad we don't get $50 a meeting like we used to. Yeah. Okay, consent calendar, there was a motion and a second, right? Yes. Okay, any further discussion? Those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed, no. That's approved unanimously, and we are adjourned, and that's the last of our business for tonight. Thank you all for coming. You're welcome to come back for your second meeting next time. And Dick, you're welcome.